The slaughter continued like a raging fire. After executing the godslaughter burst, the essence, spirit, energy, true essence, and even soul in Xianxia's entire body had condensed together fiercely, and they seemed to be seething, roaring, and burning rapidly. This was a terrifying cultivation that sacrificed one's vital essence in exchange for strength. Originally, his cultivation and comprehension of Tao insights was sufficient to exert 10 times his combat strength, and he'd attained the exalted rank of the Nether Transformation realm. At this moment, his strength had doubled explosively on the foundation of his 10 times combat strength, allowing him to full exert a terrifying 20 times combat strength. 20 times. What sort of terrifying combat strength was this? Since the ancient times until now, how many people were capable of attaining this? Perhaps, even the primeval ferocious beast, Yazi, who created the Godslaughter burst, would find it impossible to possess such a heaven-defying combat strength at the Nether Transformation realm like Xianxia. Under these circumstances, Xianxia slaughtered these third-level earthly immortal realm experts simply as if he was chopping fruits and vegetables, and it was no different from slaughtering chickens. A rain of blood sprayed down while shrill cries shook the 9 heavens. Xianxia's white hair fluttered like a waterfall while he held the talisman armament and moved through the surroundings. Every single slash of his sword carried an all-powerful and crushing force that swept through everything before it, and no one was capable of resisting the blunt of his might. Besides that, the pitch-black and lusterless talisman armament in his hand droned as if it was cheering after drinking the blood of his enemies. The 5 great divine talismans within the blade circulated and emanated a myriad of talisman markings while strands of chaotic source chi descended like a silvery river. It contained the might to deduce creation, and it blasted immortal sword after immortal sword flying and reaped head after head. Elder Jing Kong and the others were astounded and roared furiously with stern voices, and their faces were covered in deep disbelief. No one had expected that Xianxia would actually be so terrifying at this moment. He was simply like a god of devils that had awoken from the ages, and no one could stop his footsteps. At this moment, they were overwhelmed with terror, and their bodies couldn't be restrained from trembling with horror while their souls almost left their bodies. Not to mention forming the universal devil suppression sword formation once more, even their will to rise up and fight was collapsing and being dispersed bit by bit. How could this be possible? Every strike slaughters a person. Could it be that this little bastard has been possessed by a god? Quickly! This kid is too terrifying, and he isn't someone we can go against. Quickly ask senior brother Yunzhu to make a move. At this moment, only 3 people including Elder Jing Kong remained, and they were like headless flies as they cried out with terror and rage while fleeing madly like panic-stricken stray dogs. It was even to the extent that they couldn't wait for Elder Yunzhu to assist them, and they intended to abandon the grand formation right away and flee. Don't even think of escaping. Xianxia stretched out his hand and grabbed while activating the manner within the jade pendant, causing it to transform into a black hole that actually instantaneously sucked Jing Kong and the others into it. At the same time, his figure entered into the manner along with them and vanished. This universal devil suppression sword formation was formed from 8 immortal artifact-level sword drawings, and it sealed up the heavens and the earth to form a world of its own. So if he were to allow Jing Kong and the others to escape, then even though he would be able to deal with the danger within this formation, it was impossible to guarantee that there were no enemies lying in ambush outside it. Xianxia enveloped Jing Kong and the others completely within the manor, causing it to be impossible for them to escape. So long as he annihilated them before leaving, the danger he faced would undoubtedly reduce greatly. Swoosh! A jet-black light flashed before the manor vanished. The entire world returned to peace once more, and only the dense and pungent smell of blood drifted through and filled the sky. Outside the universal devil suppression sword formation, Elder Yunzhu seemed to have noticed something, causing him to raise his head abruptly and stare fixedly at the drawing formed from 8 sword drawing that floated in midair and covered the sky, and a wisp of bewilderment flashed on his face. He was able to clearly sense that the universal devil suppression sword formation wasn't controlled any longer, and it was circulating by itself. This was slightly strange. Could it be that some sort of unexpected event has occurred within it? Martial uncle, have you noticed something? The nearby Lung Chaner was stunned. He was discussing the details of the Sky Dao abandoned mountains treasure map with Wen Tianxua. Yet she suddenly noticed that the expression of Elder Yunzhu seemed to be slightly off, causing her to put this inquiry forward. Something's slightly off. Elder Yunzhu frowned while a wisp of seriousness suffused his face. According to my calculations based on time, it would be sufficient for Jing Kong and the others to annihilate that little kid with their strengths. But now, there isn't even a slightest bit of movement. Moreover, the universal devil suppression sword formation isn't being controlled any longer. Lung Chaner was horrified and felt that it was difficult to believe. It can't be. With the cultivations of martial Uncle Jing Kong and the others, even if they failed in annihilating Xianxia, they would surely have sufficient time to flee. How could they have suddenly abandoned the grand formation? Elder Yunzhu frowned. Unfortunately, I'm unable to enter forcefully at this moment as well. Otherwise, unless Jing Kong and the others open up the grand formation from within, I'll suffer backlash from the grand formation, and it wouldn't be worth it. But now it would seem like it's obviously impossible. Could it be that Chan? That kid killed everyone. The nearby Wen Tianxua was greatly astounded, and his face turned pale while he almost involuntarily cried out Xianxia's name. Isn't this too terrifying? If even 13 earthly immortal realm experts from the Heavenflow Dao sect were unable to do anything to Xianxia, then wouldn't the operation this time end with failure? If it's really like this, then what sort of consequences would be waiting for me? When he thought up to here, Wen Tianxua's heart couldn't help but be suffused with a wisp of icy coldness, and he felt terrified and uneasy. Shut up! Lung Chaner reprimanded with a low voice. How could all those 13 martial uncles of mine possibly be annihilated in such a short period of time? I'll be the first to kill you if you continue talking nonsense. Wen Tianxua shuddered with fear when he saw the icy cold gaze of Lung Chaner that was filled with fury, and his expression changed indeterminately while he stayed silent like a cicada in winder. We can only wait for now. Elder Yunzhu went silent for a long time before speaking slowly. Lung Chaner went silent. She knew as well that the universal devil suppression sword formation was too formidable, so even if there was no one controlling the grand formation, it was extremely difficult for someone to enter from the outside and take charge of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worthy to be called an immortal artifact. It was just as Elder Yunzhu had said, they could only wait outside the grand formation now, and wait for the true victor to be decided within the grand formation. Time flowed by bit by bit. On the other hand, the expressions of Lung Chaner and Elder Yunzhu gradually became heavy and even slightly unsightly. At this moment, even the other cultivators nearby noticed something was off. Hasn't this battle gone on for too long? How could the victor have not been decided until now? Could it be that some sort of unexpected event has occurred within? At this moment, everyone even forgot the reason they'd come here, and all their minds were placed on the drawing in midair that covered the sky as they silently awaited amidst an oppressive atmosphere. Rumble. After another 10 minutes passed and right when everyone was on the verge of losing patience, the grand formation suddenly emitted a wave of intense rumbling before immortal energy flowed through it as it emanated a myriad of blazing radiances. Is the outcome about to be decided? The breathing of everyone present here became heavy when they saw this scene, and they stared fixedly without blinking at the grand formation. The control of the grand formation is starting to be reclaimed. Lung Chaner heaved a sigh of relief when she saw this, and her entire body relaxed. Wait, it isn't Jing Kong and the others. Elder Yunzhu seemed to have noticed something, causing his gaunt face to darken abruptly as he cried out involuntarily. Someone is refining the grand formation. What? Lung Chaner's relaxed heart jerked fiercely once more, while her beautiful face changed indeterminately, and she was extremely astounded. How could this be possible? That was the great weapon of their Heavenflow Dao sect, a terrifying grand formation formed from a set of immortal artifacts that had always been in the possession of the sect master, and if it wasn't for Bing Shirtian, then not to mention utilize it, they wouldn't even be able to borrow it. Yet now, there was actually someone who wanted to refine it. When she thought about how this set of precious treasures was about to be taken by another right before her eyes, Lung Chaner felt her scalp go numb while her entire body went cold. This can't be true. How could Martial Uncle Jing Kong and the others watch idly by as such a thing occurs? How could that fellow possibly accomplish this with his strength? This is a set of immortal artifacts. Lung Chaner was scared out of her wits and muttered endlessly. Watch out! Elder Yunju seemed to have noticed something, causing his face to go grim as he stretched out his hand to pull Ling Chaner over. And then his figure flashed backwards explosively. His actions were completed swiftly and in one go, and it was swift to the limit. Bang! Right when both of them had just dodged to the side, the universal devil suppression sword formation in midair suddenly transformed into 8 vast sword drawings and split apart amidst a wave of rapid rumbling. At this instant, it was like a sun had suddenly split apart, causing blazing and surging light to spread out and illuminate the entire surroundings as if it was daytime. In the distant group of mountains, there were even waves of ferocious beast howls sounding out while the mountains trembled, and the beasts entered into a dormant state. Even the cultivators by the river couldn't help but reveal shocked expressions as they retreated endlessly. Someone has come out from within. A single person? That seems to be. Right amidst this expanse of panic, some cultivators with discerning gazes noticed to their astonishment that a tall and slender figure suddenly walked out from the center of the grand formation. Shadows fluttered about while blazing radiances flowed, and they caused him to seem like a god from the higher realms descending into the world and made it impossible for others to see his appearance clearly. But along with his appearance, the universal devil suppression sword formation that had divided into 8 suddenly stopped in midair before transforming into a flowing light that merged into the palm of that figure and vanished in the blink of an eye. Instantly, the blazing radiances in the world vanished along with it, causing the world to once again fall into a pitch-black atmosphere. However, it just happened to be the crack of dawn. So the dense darkness had just surged into appearance before being torn apart by the vast and dazzling first ray of sunlight. The dazzling light scattered down onto this figure, and it just happened to reveal his appearance clearly. He wore green clothes, had a handsome and indifferent appearance, snow-white hair that fluttered in the wind, and he carried a murderous, heavy, and ancient aura. The pupils of every gaze that encountered that figure practically simultaneously constricted, while the owners of the gazes revealed expressions of disbelief. That's Xianxia? On the other hand, when Lung Chaner and Elder Yunju saw this figure, their entire bodies froze instantaneously, while their hearts immediately fell to rock bottom. Even if they faintly sensed that there was a change in the situation, but when they really saw the appearance of that person that walked out of the grand formation clearly, they still felt indescribably shocked. Xianxia, he's actually still alive. Then, what about junior brother, martial uncle Jing Kong and the others? A bad premonition couldn't be restrained from arising within their hearts. Stomp! Stomp! Steady footsteps resounded out within the oppressive and silent atmosphere, and it jolted everyone present back to their sensed. Xianxia's white hair fluttered while killing intent surged throughout his body, and the talisman armament in his hand was suffused with a dim sheen under the first ray of daybreak, causing it to seem oppressively fierce and terrifying. Xianxia! It really was him. My God! He was actually able to walk out from the universal devil suppression sword formation. As they looked at the tall figure in midair and recalled all the rumors related to this young man, everyone present couldn't restrain the shock in their hearts and exploded into an uproar. At this moment, daybreak had arrived upon the world, whereas on the day that had just passed a moment ago, this young man had just slaughtered 8 great sinners at the earthly immortal realm before shocking back the will of a great figure by himself, and he'd blasted apart the prime blood god flags. Now, he'd broken out of the Heavenflow Dao Sect's renowned slaughter formation and successfully broke out from an encirclement. These splendid accomplishments in battle proved a step further exactly how heaven-defying his strength was. At this moment, could anyone maintain their composure while facing this peerless and monstrous genius? You're actually alive. Lung Chaner's body trembled while her beautiful face turned pale. She'd met Xianxia once around 5 years ago, and she'd utilized an extremely arrogant attitude to persuade Xianxia not to interfere with the relationship between Bing Shitian and Qin Xiui. At that time, she similarly had never expected that she would actually be able to cause such a commotion in the dark parasol's abyss, and even cause her senior brother Xianxia to lose miserably at his hand. Later on, Bing Shirtian personally made a move and crippled Xianxia's black hole world, and at the same time she felt regretful. She couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief in her heart. She knew that premature destruction of this peerless genius was equivalent to eliminating a future trouble for the Heaven Flow Dao sect. But no one had expected that not only did Xianxia survive, he even repaired his black hole world, causing his cultivation to improve greatly. As soon as he appeared in the world, he slaughtered her senior brother Xianxia and even crushed the top experts from the Eternal Spirit Mountain, shocking the world once again. On the other hand, Xianxia had never expected that in a mere 5 years of time, Xianxia's cultivation would actually leave all his peers far behind and attain an inconceivable state, and the feat of annihilating 8th great sinners at the earthly immortal realm was sufficient to prove all this. Every single genius in the world would be cast into a shade before such a figure because it was practically impossible to find another person in the world that could rival him. It was precisely because of this that she'd accompanied the seniors of her sect to annihilate Xianxia this time, and it was also the reason why they didn't just deploy over 10 earthly immortal realm experts. They even borrowed a great weapon of slaughter like the universal devil suppression sword formation. These forces were sufficient to sweep through any first-rate sect in the dark reverie. But they'd still lost. Not only did Xianxia survive, even the universal devil suppression sword formation was refined and taken possession of by him. If she didn't witness it with her own 2 eyes, Xianxia felt that everything she'd experienced today was like an extremely absurd nightmare. And it was so unreal and so difficult to accept. You're actually still alive? This was obviously an unnecessary question, and it obviously showed how strong the shock in Xianxia's heart was. Of course I'm alive. Unfortunately, those seniors of yours are dead. Xianxia replied indifferently, and his gaze was like a bolt of lightning as his cold gaze locked onto Xianxia. All those years ago, even Bing Shirtian personally crippling my black hole world was unable to kill me. Do you think you can annihilate me by relying on those old goats? Aren't you thinking too highly of yourselves? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the surroundings was astounded. It could be said that this was the first time they'd heard that Bing Shirtian had actually personally made a move to cripple Xianxia's black hole world many years ago. On the other hand, Xianxia was alive and well, and he even possessed a heaven-defying combat strength now. In other words, not only was he not crippled, he'd reconstructed his black hole world and obtained a terrifying improvement in strength within a short few years of time. The minds of everyone shook. Isn't this a little too shocking? If news of this was to be spread out, it would probably instantly stir the entire cultivation world and even cause a head-on conflict between the Heaven Flow Dao sect and the 9 Radiant Sword sect. After all, this incident was truly too despicable. Bing Shirtian was a dignified heavenly immortal, yet he actually disregarded his dignity and made a move against a disciple of the 9 Radiant Sword sect. If the 9 Radiant Sword sect didn't react in the slightest before such an incident, then would it have any face to stay ranked amongst the 10 great immortal sects? Xianxia's countenance turned ghastly pale. This incident had always been kept a secret, and even if it was in the Heaven Flow Dao sect, only a small group of people knew about. Now, when she saw Xianxia reveal it in front of everyone, her fear and fury was obvious. Little kid, you actually dared to slander Lord Bing Shirtian like this. You can only atone with your death. Suddenly, Elder Yunju shouted explosively as he flashed out, and he executed a teleportation technique. In the next moment, he'd arrived before Xianxia, and his fingers were like hooks that stabbed fiercely towards Xianxia's head. Bang! Even though it was 5 fingers, yet it was formidable like magic treasures. They were coiled with immortal energy and emanated an exceedingly terrifying force field that enveloped Xianxia's entire body with the intention of annihilation him, so as to avoid him talking nonsense. Old dog, trying to silence me? Fuck off! Xianxia shouted fiercely with a voice that was like thunderclaps, and he raised his hand and slapped towards the strike from Yunju. Crack! A wave of ear-piercing sounds of bones breaking resounded out. Elder Yunju was directly blasted flying, and his figure swayed while his expression alternated between a livid and ashen expression. Moreover, his entire right hand had been struck to the point all its bones had split apart. Xianxia gasped. He actually forced martial uncle Yunju back with a raise of his hand. After all, Yunju possessed a cultivation at the 6th level of the earthly immortal realm. Not to mention nether transformation realm cultivators. How many earthly immortal realm cultivators in the world were capable of injuring him with a single strike? At this instant, Lung Chaner instantly understood a piece of reality, and she abandoned the last trace of hope in her heart. She knew that her martial uncle Jing Kong and the others had surely been annihilated. You're courting death. Never had Elder Yunju imagined that Xianxi's strength would actually be heaven-defying to such an extent, and it was simply like a legend. This caused him to feel disbelief, and his furious roars shook the heavens as immortal energy rumbled through his body, causing his right arm to instantly recover to its previous state. After that, he withdrew a copper bell that emanated divine radiance before smashing it down at Xianxia. This was his immortal artifact, the Taya 9 Spiral Bell. It was a true immortal artifact that contained the energy of 9 spirals of obliteration. Every single spiral was a purgatory-like world, and once one was suppressed within it, even though one wouldn't die instantaneously, the degree of pain one would feel wasn't inferior to being thrown into the 18 levels of hell. One would suffer endless torment, and it caused others to tremble with fear and go pale upon hearing it being mentioned. Elder Yunju had relied on this immortal artifact to create an enormous reputation for himself in the cultivation world. He'd annihilated countless formidable experts, and all of them were tormented to death by his Taya 9 Spiral Bell. It was precisely because of this that he was called the Living Azura. His methods were extremely cold and ruthless, and it caused his enemies to hate him to the bone and fear him to the bone. The copper bell descended from the sky while its body emanated a myriad of strands of crimson and blood-red radiance. Waves of rumbles that were like a tempestuous storm resounded, and merely the shapeless sound wave shook everyone present to the point their vital blood roiled, while their souls seemed to be on the verge of being extracted. Swoosh! She didn't even spare it a glance instead, and he directly slashed out with a sword light suffused with creation chi. Bang! It actually struck the bell to the point of trembling violently. Even though this bell was formidable, then talisman armament in his possession wasn't inferior. Not to mention he'd executed the Godslaughter burst now, and his strength had multiplied explosively, so why would he be afraid of getting injured? 9 spirals combine into one and obliterate the world. Die! Besides being shocked and furious, Elder Yunju's expression couldn't help but become extremely heavy when he saw this, and he shouted endlessly with a stern voice. At this moment, he'd taken Xianxia to be his #1 enemy, and he didn't dare underestimate Xianxia in the slightest any longer. Bang! The Taya 9 Spiral Bell rumbled violently while numerous extremely vast phenomena suffused its surface. There was the mortal world, ancient temples. Countless brilliant and bright aura were converged within this bell. It seemed as if the past, present, and future were condensed together and transformed into a kingdom that kept out all evil. A Buddhist treasure. This is actually a mysterious Buddhist treasure immortal artifact. Someone with a discerning gaze recognized the origins of this immortal artifact, and he couldn't help but exclaim with shock. Everyone was terrified. Never had anyone imagined that this Elder Yunju from the Heavenflow Dao sect would actually possess a Buddhist treasure immortal artifact that came from the Buddhist sect. Even in the 3 dimensions, the Buddhist sect was an extremely mysterious existence. They lived in seclusion within secret realms while cultivating in an aesthetical manner and shutting themselves out from the outside world. They used great will and persistence to seek to prove their beliefs, and they diligently searched for the paradise of happiness and the unfettered world. Their cultivation system formed a whole of its own and had a style of its own, and it was extremely vast. Even though they hadn't been heard of in the world for countless years, no one dared to overlook their existence. For example, the techniques of deity transformation, heaven-eye connection, thought reading, Buddhist world palm, compressed lotus mountain, earth-penetrating gold light, and numerous other renowned great divine abilities in the 3 dimensions came from Buddhist sect cultivators. Besides that, the Buddhist treasures in the hands of Buddhist cultivators were a type of divine weapon that was similar to a shaman treasure. Every single Buddhist treasure required Buddhist intent and Buddha radiance to be refined, and its might was extremely terrifying, especially Buddhist treasures that had attained the immortal artifact rank. They were capable of annihilating evil and driving away evil intentions while just being placed far away, and they caused the heavens and the earth to be bathed in the envelopment of Buddhist light, transforming into a place of peace, tranquility, and happiness. If a Buddhist treasure was utilized with one's entire strength, it would be like one was possessed by a warrior attendant of the Buddha, causing the Buddha to descend to the world with exceedingly terrifying might. What can a tiny Buddhist treasure do to me? Xianxia's entire body suddenly transformed into an ocean of talisman markings when facing this strike, and he executed the creation sword insight once more, causing a few thousands of sparkling sword chi to slash out and go head-on against the P81 spiral bell. A competition for the right to create the world. This conflict was like two gods in battle to seize the right to control and rule over the world. Not a single person could describe the might of this collision. The entire heavens and the earth were trembling as bangs were emitted in the air and expanse after expanse of space were shattered. The nearby cultivators that even had earthly immortal realm experts amongst them were affected by this force. All of their figures staggered while their faces went pale, and a mouthful of blood even sprayed out abruptly from the mouths of some people with weaker strength before they collapsed to the ground. Instantly, rumbling that was strong like thunderclaps and extremely blazing light drowned out this expanse of the world, causing everyone to be unable to clearly see exactly what was occurring. Who actually won in the end? Even though everyone was matchlessly astounded, their eyes still stared fixedly at the battlefield with the utmost concentration, as they were deeply afraid of missing the slightest detail. Rumbling shook the heavens while blazing radiance enveloped the heavens and the earth. Everyone was unable to see exactly what had happened, and they stared with eyes wide open, while shock couldn't help but appear on their faces. It's actually horrifying to such an extent. That's a formidable existence at the 6th level of the earthly immortal realm that even possesses a Buddhist treasure immortal artifact. Yet he has been pressured by Xianxia to such a state. I heard that he's a disciple from a minor world that entered the dark reverie just a few years ago. But now, he has already grown to such a heaven-defying state, and it's truly difficult to imagine exactly how he cultivated. There's no justice in this world, truly no justice. A junior in the nether transformation realm is actually capable of rivaling a 6th-level earthly immortal realm expert. This, everyone discussed animatedly, and even Lung Chaner couldn't help but clench her fist tightly, causing her nails to sink deep into her flesh while she felt anxious and perturbed to the limit. Rumble. Then Xianxia and Elder Yunju finally split apart after the terrifying collision. Dust and smoke effused out. Xianxia's snow-white hair fluttered along with his clothes, and the vital blood in his entire body was rapidly declining while his entire body seemed to have instantly aged. It seemed as if 1,000 years had passed in this moment, and the passage of time occurred in an instant. His imposing aura suffered an enormous decline as well. This was the sight of the God-Slaughter burst's might vanishing before its side effects erupted. It would cause his cultivation to instantly return to its original state and cause him to become extremely weak and dispirited because of the enormous exhaustion of his spirit, energy, essence, and quintessence energy. Even though everyone present didn't know that Xianxia had executed the ultimate technique of the Yazi clan, when they witnessed this scene, all of them had a strong feeling that the current Xianxia was like a tiger that had its fangs pulled out, and he was in a ceaselessly weakening state. On the other hand, Elder Yunju's figure stood there without moving while his eyes stared fixedly at Xianxia, and what he was thinking was unknown as he actually stayed silent. Who exactly won this battle? A wisp of bewilderment arose in the hearts of many. Lung Chaner's beautiful brows raised instead while she beamed. Merely based on the outward appearance of things, Xianxia's state seemed to be much more inferior after this strike, and he was on the verge of collapsing in defeat. However, right at this moment, Elder Yunju suddenly said, "The God-Slaughter burst. Not bad, little kid. Unfortunately, you're bound to follow in my footsteps today." His voice came and went, and it was extremely hoarse and revealed a horrifying aura. Follow in his footsteps. What does this mean? In next to no time, everyone came to an understanding because as soon as Elder Yunju finished speaking, his head suddenly tilted to the side before falling off his neck. Pooh! A stream of scarlet-red blood sprayed out like a fountain from his severed neck, and it dyed the sky red. Under the illumination of the first ray of sunlight, it was suffused with a horrifying yet gorgeous sheen. Elder Yunju's head had actually been cut off during the previous collision, and it seemed that because the sword chi was too sharp, his head only fell off after he finished speaking. Hiss! Everyone present gasped when they saw this scene, and they were frozen on the spot like clay statues. A higher-up of the Heavenflow Dao sect, a 6th-level earthly immortal realm expert, had actually been beheaded by the number 1 figure in the younger generation of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, causing blood to rain through the sky. Martial Uncle Yunju. The happiness on the corners of Lung Channer's mouth froze before transforming into deep disbelief. Her chest rose and fell rapidly when she couldn't endure the grief and fury in her heart any longer, causing her to emit an extremely miserable and shrill cry. She was unable to accept such a situation. Her martial uncle Jing Kong and the others had perished, the Universal Devil Suppression Sword formation had been taken, and at this moment even her martial uncle Yunju with the highest cultivation had perished on the spot, causing her to be left all alone. How could she possibly accept such a scene? You deserve death. Chen Shi. You deserve death for your crimes. After that, she swiftly raised her head while her eyes stared fixedly at the distant Chen Shi, and her resentful gaze seemed as if she wished for nothing more than to skin Chen Shi alive. Even though martial uncle Yunju has fallen, you probably don't feel well yourself, right? There's no need for you to forcefully hold on because I've already discerned that the energy within your entire body is flowing out rapidly, and you're on the verge of exhaustion. So how can you fight me? Lung Channer suddenly started roaring with laughter while she spoke with a grim voice, and her beautiful and exquisite face was actually suffused with a savage and mad expression. You can come over and try. Chen Shi stood in midair, and his expression remained unchanged as he spoke coldly. Even though he spoke like this, but the ceaselessly weakening aura on his body was impossible to be concealed, and it was clearly noticed by everyone in the surroundings. They couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Looks like it's just as Lung Channer said. After that Chen Shi experienced the battle from before. He's probably on the verge of death and can't hold on for much longer. Lung Channer's laughter didn't reduce in the slightest as her eyes surged with flames of madness, and she chuckled. Chen Shi. Oh, Chen Shi. Do you think everyone in the world is blind? As she spoke, her face suddenly turned cold as she gritted her teeth and said, even if you still have a bit of strength remaining, but what if everyone present here makes a move against you? Chen Shi went silent while his gaze turned cold. Why aren't you speaking? Do you think that they wouldn't dare make a move against you? Unfortunately, you've forgotten that not only do you possess an immortal sword in your possession, you even possess the Universal Devil Suppression Sword formation of my Heavenflow Dao sect. Moreover, the treasures left behind by those 13 martial uncles of mine might have fallen into your hands as well. When she saw Chen Shi staying silent, Lung Channer couldn't refrain from roaring with laughter. Tell me, when facing a tiger that has lost its power, would they be able to restrain themselves from making a move? Or will they tear of your tiger skin and divide up all the treasures in your possession? As soon as these words were spoken, it really caused everyone in the surroundings to become restless. It was even to the extent that the eyes of some cultivators that were hidden in the shadows couldn't help but reveal a wisp of blazing excitement. Right? Chen Shi was heavily injured and on the verge of death now, whereas there were many shocking treasures in his possession, and there was no lack of immortal artifacts amongst them. He was simply like a human-shaped treasure vault, so how could it not draw out their greed? Men die in the pursuit of wealth just like birds die in the pursuit of food. Just as Lung Channer had said, under the stimulation of sufficient benefits, not to mention Chen Shi, who was the number 1 figure in the younger generation of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, they would even dare to go against a god. Very nicely done. Chen Shi finally spoke, and his expression still remained cold and calm as he said coldly, "But do you think they'd let you off after killing me?" Lung Channer was stunned, and then her expression changed indeterminately. She knew that Chen Shi was speaking the truth. If these people seized the treasures in Chen Shi's possession, then they would surely not obediently hand over the Universal Devil Suppression Sword formation and the treasures left behind by her martial uncles. Moreover, For the sake of keeping this incident a secret, killing her to silence her was undoubtedly the only choice. So what if I die? In the next moment, Xianxia revealed a ruthless expression while she spoke resolutely. Do you think that I have the face to return to my sect under these circumstances? Since it's like this, why don't I drag you down with me? Swoosh! As she spoke, she suddenly charged explosively while holding a dark blue-colored sword in her hand, and it slashed out horizontally at Xianxia. Sword chi surged and transformed into a dark blue ocean that whistled over, and it carried a firm and ruthless, imposing aura. Even though she only possessed a combat strength at the nether transformation realm, it was sufficient to be lethal to the current Xianxia. Just like everyone present here had noticed, his current state was already weak and dispirited to the limit, and his body was utterly not capable of battle any longer. It was even to the extent that he was worried he would collapse from the slightest movement. After all, since the battle had begun until now, from being trapped in the universal devil suppression sword formation to executing the godslaughter burst, and then finally to colliding head-on with Elder Yunju just moments ago, he'd exhausted an enormous amount of energy, and he'd overdrawn the strength of his body a long time ago. The reason he was still able to stand in midair was entirely because he was relying on a strand of fortitude and willpower to support himself. On the other hand, Xianxia had dared to charge straight at him precisely because she'd noticed this. Otherwise, with her character, she would absolutely not make such a desperate decision in such a short period of time. Even the other nearby cultivators were restless, and they seemed as if they would charge forward to divide up Xianxia's treasures as soon as Xianxia succeeded. Right amidst this critical situation, Xianxia, who stood in midair, suddenly started laughing, and a wisp of deep disdain appeared on the corners of his mouth. Swoosh! In the next moment, a figure suddenly appeared before him as if it had teleported over, and at the instant it appeared, it raised its hand and grabbed out, causing its hand to transform into an enormous hand that covered the sky. This enormous hand had fingers that were like pillars capable of holding up the sky. They were coiled with a myriad of chilly starlight and circulated with the 5 elements while lightning and wind resonated together, and it emanated a vast, imposing aura that was desolate, mysterious, and seemed to contain everything in the world. As soon as it appeared, it completely crushed the dark blue sword chi that assaulted him. Rumble! Blazing rays of light rumbled as Xianxia's entire body was blasted flying by the residual wind emitted by this strike, and a mouthful of blood sprayed out of her mouth while her gorgeous and exquisite face was covered in dense terror. Who is it? Could it be Xianxia's reinforcements? It wasn't just her. Even the pupils of the other nearby cultivators constricted from the shock of having witnessed this sudden scene, and their figures that were about to charge forward froze on the spot. Xianxia, there was no enmity between us, yet you provoked me repeatedly. Could it be that you really think I wouldn't dare kill you because you're a woman? The dust and smoke dispersed while a calm and icy cold voice suddenly sounded out. At the same time, Xianxia's figure appeared once more within everyone's field of vision. However, when they saw his appearance clearly, all of them were stunned. At this moment, he wore an apricot yellow Taoist robe while his long hair had become dense and jet black. Moreover, he possessed an extraordinary bearing, while there seemed to be the sun and moon alternating within his eyes, and his entire body seemed like a god of devils standing in the heavens and emanated an immovable aura. Everyone was able to clearly sense the changes in Xianxia's bearing. If it wasn't for his appearance remaining the same, everyone would almost think that this Xianxia and the one from before were 2 different people. An external avatar, someone exclaimed with shock. No, the external avatar is an ability of the nether transformation realm in body refinement. Moreover, it's absolutely impossible to utilize an external avatar while the main body is damaged. Someone shook his head. Then, it wouldn't be a real clone, right? My God, that's an ability only a heavenly immortal may possess. For example, Bing Shirtian descended into the world with a clone. Impossible. That sort of clone already contained the energy of the laws and will. Xianxia is only at the nether transformation realm, so how could he possibly comprehend the laws and possess the will of the immortal? Everyone was surprised and bewildered. They were unable to discern exactly what sort of ability Xianxia had executed to actually produce such a clone. But without any doubt, this clone was extremely formidable, and it walked purely on the path of fiend god body refinement. His apricot yellow Taoist robes fluttered as Xianxia stood above the clouds, and the shaman energy in his entire body surged like an enormous raging river. Even though he stood there without moving, he naturally carried an oppressive, imposing aura like a sovereign that had descended into the world. This was his clone. This body was formed according to the worldmen technique passed down to him by Wuxia and with his own blood essence as its foundation. Regardless of if it was consciousness, comprehension in Tao insights, or cultivation experience, it was completely alike to Xianxia. It was like the relationship between one's right hand and left hand, and besides their cultivation, everything else was completely the same. This clone had always been silently comprehending and improving its cultivation within the world of stars, and under the nurturing of the blood crystals from the lightning spirit, it was undergoing a transformation at practically every single moment. Coupled with the speed of time moving around 10 times slower in the world of stars when compared with the outside world. At this moment, this clone's body refinement cultivation had broken through the rebirth realm to attain the nether transformation realm a long time ago. In other words, Xianxia had relied on this extremely miraculous technique, the worldmen technique, to overcome the curse and restrictions of the fiend gods now, and his body refinement and chi refinement cultivations had attained the nether transformation realm. This was absolutely a magnificent feat that made history, and it could be said to be unprecedented and will never be achieved again. It seemed impossible to find another existence like him in the entire heavens and the earth. At this moment, it was the first time Xianxia's clone had appeared in before everyone in the world, and it forced Lung Chaner back in one go, causing all the nearby cultivators to be shocked. How could this be possible? This is absolutely impossible. Lung Chaner's pupils dilated while she cried out repeatedly, and she didn't dare believe that Xianxia, who was obviously exhausted, would be able to instantly recover his combat strength. She couldn't bother to wipe off the bloodstains that flowed from the corners of her mouth, and she seemed like an abandoned and resentful wife while her beautiful and gorgeous face was covered in resentment and anger. Bang! Dark blue sword chi shot into the skies and transformed into tempestuous waves that struck towards Xianxia once more. She was unable to accept such a situation, or perhaps, she'd been shocked by everything that had happened today to the point of losing all reason, and she was like a mad woman that was fearless towards death. Even if I die today, I'll drag you down with me. A mad and fierce cry sounded out from Lung Chaner's mouth, and it revealed boundless resolution and resentment. Are you even worthy of dragging me down with you? Said Xianxia with a cold voice. As he spoke, his figure flashed and charged right at her before punching out, and it caused a myriad of thunderstorm vortexes to rumble as they collapsed and shattered the surrounding shape. Stellar lightning form, Devourer Tao insight. Bang! His fist carried enormous might as it pushed forward with indomitable might, and it directly blasted apart the dark blue rain of sword chi that covered the sky before charging towards Lung Chaner without losing momentum in the slightest. After that, it instantly transformed from fist into palm and tightly grabbed onto her neck. The strike was all-powerful and relaxed to the extreme. No matter how formidable Lung Chaner was, she was only a top figure in the nether transformation realm in the end. She was far from being able to compare with Xuyan, let alone be a match for Xianxia. In just a single strike, she was held up by the neck like a chick, and no matter how she struggled, she was unable to escape Xianxia's grasp. All the nearby cultivators gasped in their hearts when they saw this, and they seemed as if they'd been doused with cold water, causing the blazing greed in their hearts to disperse greatly. Even though it was a mere single strike, it allowed them to clearly notice that Xianxia's current state seemed to be on par to when he killed all his enemies earlier, and he wasn't weak and exhausted as he was before. Being grabbed by the neck caused Lung Chaner to flush from suffocation, and her face warped while her gaze was filled with resentment. Yet this resentment was quickly replaced by terror. At this moment, she who was on the verge of death was stimulated by the aura of extreme danger, causing her to suddenly awaken from her resentment and fury and sense unprecedented terror. Even an ant struggled for life, let alone a genius from the Heavenflow Tao sect like her? You can't kill me. Lung Channer's teeth chattered as she spoke with terror and fury. Oh! Xianxia's gaze didn't contain any emotion, and it was icy cold and indifferent. Even if she was a woman, she'd repeatedly carried the intention of harming and killing him, so her crimes were unforgivable. Not to mention, in Xianxia's eyes, so long as one was an enemy, then there was no difference of gender and age. Martial ancestor Qing cares deeply for me, and she has always taken me as a disciple. If you want to regain her feelings, then you can't kill me. Lung Channer spoke swiftly. She was able to sense Xianxia's killing intent, so time was of the essence. She didn't dare hesitate in the slightest, as she was deeply afraid being slightly slow might cost her life. Oh! Xianxia gave the same reply once more, and merely based on his expression, it was utterly impossible to discern exactly what he was thinking in his heart. But Lung Channer couldn't care about all this, and she continued. You've seen it as well. All the people pursuing you are great figures at the earthly immortal realm from my Heavenflow Dao sect, but they acted according to my orders. Do you know why? Before Xianxia could give any reaction, she answered her own question. Very simple, it's because Lord Bing Shirtian instructed them to act in that way. The reason he did that is for the sake of winning me over to help him ease up his relationship with martial ancestor Qing. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her eyes to stare at Xianxia's eyes before her expression recovered slight calm and composure, and then she said, Now, you finally understand how important I am in martial ancestor Qing's heart, right? Let me go, and once I return to the sect, I'll help speak good things about you before martial ancestor Qing. Crack! Her voice stopped abruptly. Lung Channer stared with eyes wide open while muffled groans sounded out from her throat, and she seemed to not dare believe that Xianxia would suddenly act ruthlessly and twist her neck. In the next moment, her vision turned black as she lost all consciousness. Could it be that you don't know that if Xioi knew how you're chased after me with the intention to kill me, she would annihilate you in the first possible moment? Xianxia raised his hand and tossed Lung Channer's corpse out, causing it to drop from midair and fall into the river with a thump. Everyone in the surroundings was shocked. The conversation between Xianxia and Lung Channer was carried out via voice transmission, so they hadn't heard it. But at this moment, when they saw Xianxia suddenly acting ruthlessly and directly ending Lung Channer's life, they still couldn't help but be terrified. He was even able to do that to such a peerlessly beautiful young woman? You're actually so ruthless at such a young age. I truly can't watch on. I'll seek justice for these fallen fellow Taoists from the Heavenflow Dao sect today. An old man suddenly stood out, and he directly teleported to arrive before Xianxia as he spoke, and then his palms overlapped into a mysterious seal before slapping down at Xianxia. Extremely blazing immortal energy flowed on his palms, and he seemed to have already utilized all his might. Old goat, you speak with such righteous intent, but aren't you just greedy and intend to take a share of the treasures in my possession? Xianxia sneered and was unafraid as he stepped forward, and it caused the heavens and the earth to tremble. His entire body was coiled with a myriad of arcs of lightning, causing his entire body to seem like an enormous thunderstorm vortex as he collided head-on with the old man. Bang! Both of them collided with each other like two volcanoes smashing against each other, and it caused a bang that shook the heavens. After that, under the astounded gazes of everyone present, the old man was blasted flying while repeatedly coughing up blood. Moreover, he didn't even have the chance to dodge when he was enveloped by an enormous thunderstorm vortex before his entire body was minced and obliterated instantly by the thunderstorm vortex. In a single strike, he'd annihilated an earthly immortal realm expert. Witnessing this scene caused everyone in the vicinity to not dare carry any hope in their hearts, and they revealed expressions of terror. Just as Xianxia had said earlier, there were still some fellows amongst the nearby cultivators that had been blinded by greed, and they couldn't forget the treasures in his possession. They originally thought that no matter how formidable Xianxia was, since he battled until now, he was probably on the verge of collapse, and perhaps they didn't even have to make a move but would be able to obtain some benefits. However, the horrifying and bloody scene before their eyes was like a sledgehammer that directly shattered the trace of hope and dreams that still remained in their heart. This kid can't be defeated. At this moment, The same thought couldn't help but arise in the hearts of every single cultivator in the surroundings. Thump! However, to everyone's surprise, Xianxia actually transformed into a ray of light that shot into the river below him and vanished in the blink of an eye. What is he doing? Everyone was stunned, and then someone seemed to have come to an understanding and said doubtfully, "He wouldn't have gone to unearth the treasure vault of the Sky Dao Palace, right? It's possible." Someone seemed to have suddenly thought of something and said, "Xianxia helped the Marquis Wen's estate annihilate 8 great sinners. And when Tianxua promised to share the treasure map in his possession with Xianxia, could it be that the treasure vault of the Sky Dao Palace is beneath the river?" Everyone was in an uproar, and they couldn't help but reveal a wisp of excitement. Hadn't they come to the Sky Dao abandoned mountain this time precisely for the treasure vault? Wait, even if he went to go look for the treasure vault, there's no need to leave so hastily, right? Could it be that there's some sort of reason behind this? Someone dissented. Bang! That person's voice was still resounding in the air when the space above the river suddenly exploded open, and then a mighty figure that was coiled with boundless immortal energy and emanated infinite light walked out from within the space with large strides. He was entirely like a scorching sun that emanated a radiant glow. His entire body was covered in immortal energy and 1,000 strands of auspicious qi, and they transformed into strands of the energy of the laws. As soon as he appeared, the entire world was trembling as it was respectfully awaiting the arrival of an emperor. This person was too dazzling, and it caused others to be utterly incapable of seeing his face clearly. But the more it was like this, the more their hearts trembled. The nearby cultivators and even the earthly immortal realm experts nearby couldn't restrain their hearts from palpitating at this moment. A heavenly immortal. This is absolutely a great figure at the heavenly immortal realm. Everyone was astounded and felt even more afraid, causing them to go silent like cicadas in the winter and not dare make a rash move. They were deeply afraid that a tiny movement might infuriate the great figure in the distance. "I was still a step too late. They're actually all dead," that figure muttered with a low and piercingly cold voice that didn't contain a shred of emotion. "Looks like I've still underestimated the speed of his growth. If I wait for the time limit of 100 years to arrive, then perhaps he would really be able to threaten me." "Very good. It's even more interesting like this. Once that day arrives, I'll surely prepare an enormous pleasant surprise for you." His voice was still drifting through the sky while that mighty and brilliant figure had vanished since a long time ago, and it seemed as if he'd never appeared. Everyone looked at each other and went silent for a long time before someone couldn't restrain the astonishment in his heart and let out an extremely ear-piercing exclaim of shock. "Lord Bing Shirtian. That was absolutely the emissary of the immortal dimension. Lord Bing Shirtian." On the other hand, even more people noticed something to their horror. She wouldn't have noticed Bing Shirtian's arrival beforehand, so he dived hastily into the character-shaped river, right? On this day, the news that she had slaughtered 13 earthly immortal realm experts from the Heavenflow Dao sect, refined the universal devil suppression sword formation, and then annihilated Elder Yunju, who was at the 6th level of the earthly immortal realm, swiftly spread out, and it caused the entire dark reverie to be stirred greatly. Is this true? She just killed 8 great sinners, then swept through another group of experts, and he annihilated over 10 earthly immortal realm experts from the Heavenflow Dao sect by himself? I don't believe it. My God. Breaking news. Explosive news. The number 1 figure in the 9 Radiant Sword sect's younger generation is heaven-defying. Even a 6th-level earthly immortal realm expert's head was cut off by him. Practically everyone was stunned upon hearing the news, and they didn't dare believe all this because less than a day had passed since she annihilated the 8 earthly immortal realm great sinners. Was it possible for him to carry out such a shocking and frightful deed in such a short period of time? This had simply exceeded logic, and it was extraordinarily formidable and horrifying. All the experts of the 10 great immortal sects and 6 lineages of the devil sects in the dark reverie were shocked, and numerous earthly immortal realm experts that lived in seclusion were alarmed by this. They walked out from their places of closed-door cultivation and understood the situation in detail from their disciples. There were even great figures in the unknown lands and secluded paradise that were alarmed, and they opened their eyes amidst the rumbling of the Grand Tao and seemed to see through the boundless space as they looked towards a single direction in the dark reverie. On this day, the dark reverie was stirred. This piece of news swept through the surroundings like a typhoon, and everyone was horrified and found it difficult to believe that a young man who was only at the nether transformation realm was capable of achieving this. Even if it's a figure that's unequaled in his generation and at the exalted rank, could it be that he has already attained the earthly immortal realm a long time ago and intentionally concealed his cultivation? Someone guessed like this because there would be no way to explain it otherwise. Impossible! If he has advanced into the earthly immortal realm, then he would surely possess immortal energy. But Xianxia didn't. Someone else shook his head and didn't believe this. If he executed the Godslaughter burst while possessing 10 times combat strength, then perhaps he would be able to annihilate a third-level earthly immortal rank expert. But how could he have possibly been able to slaughter Elder Yunju at the 6th level of the earthly immortal realm? There's something strange about it. There's surely something strange about it. Some old seniors acutely noticed something unusual because Xianxia was too strong and was simply like a freak, and he was like a variable that was impossible to comprehend. But wasn't the Heaven Flow Tao sect too despicable in this battle? They deployed so many great figures and even utilized such a great weapon like the Universal Devil Suppression Sword formation merely for the sake of dealing with the 9 Radiant Sword sects Xianxia. If it was any other person, that person would probably have been crushed a long time ago, right? At the same time, most people were slightly indignant as they felt the methods of the Heaven Flow Tao sect, who was one of the 10 great immortal sects, was so despicable to the point of being infuriating. Now, it can already be confirmed that all of this was ordered by the emissary of the immortal dimension, Misfortune. Don't forget that he appeared on the Sky Tao abandoned mountain in the end. The evils of love. Xianxia, Misfortune, Xianxia. Amongst these 3 people, one is of the most dazzling and peerless genius that had just risen recently. The other was the emissary of the immortal dimension, and the last had experienced 100 reincarnations and was once reputed as the number 1 genius in the dark reverie. But all of them are tied together because of love, causing favor and enmity to converge together, and the calamity of death to arise repeatedly. I wonder what sort of method will be used to put an end to this calamity of love in the end. Some people that had heard about the relationship between the 3 sighed endlessly with emotion because at the bottom of it all, wasn't all this commotion, resentment, and hatred, the calamity brought about by love? The entire dark reverie was stirred, whereas both disciples and elders in the 9 Radiant Sword sect were infuriated because of this incident. They deserve death. The Heaven Flow Tao sect deserves death. Misfortune deserves death. They bullied the disciple of my 9 Radiant Sword sect repeatedly. Do they think that there's no one capable in my 9 Radiant Sword sect? They went too far and there must be retaliation. Otherwise, what face would my 9 Radiant Sword sect have to continue maintaining a foothold in the cultivation world? They went too far. Within the central hall on True Martial Peak, all the earthly immortal realm experts were converged here and had extremely infuriated expressions. The immortal energy within their bodies rumbled, causing them to seem like numerous infuriated primeval ferocious beasts, and their imposing auras surged and caused the hearts of others to tremble. Sect Master, make a decision. Elder Lai Peng's beard and hair fluttered with rage as he spoke with a loud voice. As soon as these words were spoken, the gazes of everyone within the hall shot towards the Sect Master, Wen Huiting, that sat on the center seat. His expression was cold, a complete change to his usual warm appearance, and his gaze was faintly suffused with a piercingly cold light. In next to no time, he decided and said with a low voice, "From today onward, slaughter all members of the Heaven Flow Tao sect that appear within the territory of my 9 Radiant Sword sect. Drive out all powers that have ties with the Heaven Flow Tao sect." When he spoke up to hear, Wen Huiting swept everyone with his gaze, and then it descended onto one of the earthly immortal realm experts. "This matter will be managed by junior brother Pei Liang. If there's any defiance, then slaughter first and report it later. I'll solemnly obey Sect Master's orders." Pei Liang was a middle-aged man with a cold and ruthless bearing, and he solemnly received his orders right away upon hearing this. Besides that, call back all the disciples and elders of my 9 Radiant Sword sect that are scattered near the Heaven Flow Tao sect, and sever all relationships with the Heavenflow Dao sect. This matter will be managed by junior brother Yufeng. Acknowledged. When Huading nodded with an expressionless face while the space between his brows was filled with murderous expression, and his voice was like an enormous bell that rumbled and shook throughout the hall. Junior brother Lai Peng, you lead 27 earthly immortal realm elders from Divine Radiance Peak and take the 28 stellar Slaughterglow sword formation with you before leaving the sect immediately. Go wherever you like. And your mission is to allow everyone in the world to find out that incidents of disciples from the Heavenflow Dao sect being killed is happening repeatedly from tomorrow onward. Everyone was able to discern that when Huading was really infuriated this time, and he'd aroused killing intent in his heart. This was something that had very rarely occurred in the past. Acknowledged, said Lai Peng in a low voice, and his eyes carried pleasant surprise and a wisp of killing intent that was impossible to conceal. Since the Heavenflow Dao sect dared to deploy 14 earthly immortal realm experts with the universal devil suppression sword formation to pursue Xianxia, their 9 radiant sword sect would dare to deploy 28 earthly immortal realm experts with the 28 stellar Slaughterglow sword formation to pursue all the disciples of the Heavenflow Dao sect that were scattered all over the world. This was an extremely overbearing counterattack, and it carried the intent of proclaiming to the world that this enmity would be returned doubly. Everyone in the hall was excited, and their battle intent shot into the skies. During these past few thousands of years, due to various reasons, the overall strength of their 9 radiant sword sect had declined greatly, and its ranking in the 10 great immortal sects had fallen to the end. It was to the point that practically everyone in the world was on the verge of forgetting that the 9 radiant sword sect had once overbearingly occupied the position of number 1 sect amongst the 10 great immortal sects during its prime all those years ago. The decline of the sect caused all of these great figures to have anger held back within their hearts. But in these recent years and under the command of Wen Huading, the forces of the 9 radiant sword sect had been recovering and strengthening in secret. Coupled with the appearance of the various peak-grade Dao arts and various genius disciples surging out into appearance like bamboo shoots after the rain. Even though the overall strength of the 9 radiant sword sect still hadn't recovered to its prime state, it possessed the might to rival the Heavenflow Dao sect. Perhaps everyone in the outside world didn't know about all these changes. But as higher-ups of the 9 radiant sword sect, they were clearly aware about all of this. It just so happened that the Heavenflow Dao sect had repeatedly provoked the 9 radiant sword sect at this moment, so how could Lai Peng and all these higher-ups of the sect restrain themselves? Moreover, the forceful attitude of the sect master at this moment carried the feeling of sharpening a sword for 10 years while waiting for the moment to use it. Perhaps, from today onward, the entire cultivation world would fall into shock because the 9 radiant sword sect had risen once again. But at this moment, there was still someone that put forward some concerns and said, "Sect Master, the 3 dimensions are on the verge of an upheaval. It seemed to be ill-advised to proclaim war with the Heavenflow Dao sect." When Huading's expression remained unchanged as he said indifferently, "Since the Heavenflow Dao sect doesn't care, then why should we care? But Bing Shirtian is an emissary of the immortal dimension. If he interfered because of this..." That elder was still extremely worried, and he spoke slowly. Before he could finish speaking, when Huading had already interrupted him. "This is the mortal dimension, not the immortal dimension. Not to mention he's merely a single emissary of the immortal dimension, so he can't kick up much of a storm." When he spoke up to hear, his expression suddenly turned serious while his gaze was like a bolt of lightning as he said with a low voice, "Everyone, even though our 9 radiant sword sect has recovered a great deal of strength now, it's far from being enough. As far as I'm concerned, if the 9 radiant sword sect wants to relive its former brilliance and ascend the position of number 1 sect amongst the 10 great immortal sects, then Xianxia is the key. What do all of you think?" Everyone was stunned, and then they thought of the string of world-shocking incidents that had occurred on Xianxia, and they deeply agreed. The potential of this young man is limitless, and he can't be judged based on convention. Since the ancient times, how many people in the entire world were capable of sweeping through so many earthly immortal realm experts while possessing a cultivation in the nether transformation realm? So long as such a young man continues to grow, he's bound to become an overlord that shocks the 3 dimensions. His future accomplishments are limitless. At that time, not to mention leading the 9 Radiant Sword sect to ascend the position of number 1 sect amongst the 10 great immortal sects, it's extremely possible for him to create an even greater and brilliant achievement. So nothing can happen to Xianxia, and we absolutely can't allow him to suffer the slightest bit of grievance in the 9 Radiant Sword sect. When Huiding spoke with a tone that carried indisputable resolution. On this day, numerous great figures at the earthly immortal realm transformed into flowing rays of light as they left the 9 Radiant Sword sect, and numerous orders were sent to every single corner of the dark reverie. Swish! Beneath the river shaped like the character, waves of water surged while a tall and handsome figure moved through it and ceaselessly moved downwards. All along the way, the numerous layers of restrictions and ferocious beasts that possessed savage appearances were unable to obstruct his footsteps. 3 kilometers, 9 kilometers, 15 kilometers. Xianxia stopped when he arrived at a distance of 24 kilometers, and he seemed to be lost in thought. That person from before was probably Bing Shirtian. Fortunately, this river water can sever the detection of divine sense and immortal perception, otherwise I might have really been noticed by him. Earlier, when he suffered the ambush of Leng Chaner and the others, it was precisely because the situation beneath the surface of the river couldn't be detected by his divine sense that they would be able to successfully launch a surprise attack against him, causing him to fall into the universal devil suppression sword formation. Now, he'd similarly utilized this effect of the river water to avoid Bing Shirtian's detection. Unfortunately, my main body is injured. If I was at my prime, I would really wish to have a fight with him and see exactly how great the gap between us is. Xianxia shook his head and quickly got rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind. And then he pondered briefly, yet didn't leave this place but continued flashing downwards instead. It was very likely that the treasure vault of the Sky Dao Palace was in a concealed place at the bottom of the river, and since he'd already come here, he naturally had to explore it. Not to mention that even though he didn't possess the treasure map, he'd branded everything on the treasure map within his sea of consciousness since the beginning. Coupled with the sky key in his possession, so long as he found his destination, he wouldn't have to worry about being unable to open the treasure vault of the Sky Dao Palace that had vanished for over 10,000 years. This character-shaped river that flowed within the Sky Dao abandoned mountain was an entire 300 kilometers deep, and it was like a bottomless abyss that led to the core of the earth. Moreover, there were numerous restrictions and some ferocious and savage demon beasts distributed within it. All along the way, Xianxia had seen countless restrictions, and the deeper he went, the stronger the might of these restrictions became, causing him to have no choice but to spend some time to deal with them one by one. Fortunately, Xianxia's grasp of the Tao of Talismans had already attained the peak of perfection, so the restrictions that were extremely troubling in the eyes of others weren't capable of stopping his footsteps. This was like problem-solving questions, and they started from simple to complicated, and the difficulty multiplied in order. But so long as one grasped the ability of deducing talisman formations, then one grasped the path of answering these questions, and one just had to spend some time to solve them. Compared to these restrictions, it was the demon beasts that frequently emerged within the water that gave Xianxia a headache. The threat they posed wasn't great, but there were too many of them, and they seemed boundless and never-ending no matter how many of them he killed. Unlike the demon beasts in the outside world, practically all the demon beasts within the river were fearless towards death, and they seemed as if they didn't possess any intelligence. So long as they noticed someone approaching their territory, the person would suffer wave after wave of attacks. Even though these attacks weren't enough to pose a threat to him, it was extremely annoying and unending like flies. Under his helplessness, Xianxia could only execute the external avatar technique while he dealt with the restrictions, and he split his mind to carry out 2 activities at once, killing demon beasts while dealing with the restrictions. In this way, it was really much more relaxed for him. This was the magical effect of the external avatar technique. It was only possessed by cultivators at the nether transformation realm in body refinement, and with Xianxia's current comprehension in Tao insights, it was sufficient for him to execute 10 external avatars in battle. This was different to his clone. The clone possessed intelligence and all his experience in cultivation. Besides its cultivation, it wasn't the slightest bit different to his main body. On the other hand, external avatars were a combat technique, and the bodies formed from this were purely condensed from shaman energy and Tao insights. Moreover, they didn't possess the slightest intelligence, and they had to be controlled and used in battle by the main body. But even then, their combat strengths were capable of rivaling the main body. After all, the reason body refiners at the Nether Transformation realm were capable of crushing the multiplied combat strength executed by Chi refiners at the Nether Transformation realm was because of the formidableness of the external avatar technique. Moreover, just like the multiplied combat strength of Chi refiners, even single grand Tao profundity that was grasped to the perfection realm would allow a body refiner at the Nether Transformation realm to condense another external avatar. For example, Chun Shi had grasped 10 grand Tao profundities to the perfect realm, so he was capable of condensing 10 external avatars. After an entire 20 hours of time, Chun Shi finally arrived at the bottom of the river, and his shaman energy was almost completely consumed. The reason was extremely simple. The deeper he went, the more terrifying the might of the restrictions became, and the few restrictions at the end were even comparable to immortal restrictions. So merely dealing with them caused him to exhaust 7 or 8 hours. At the same time, the strengths of the demon beasts within the river became extremely formidable as well, and they were no different to ordinary earthly immortal realm experts and were huge in number. Under these circumstances, the pressure he faced was obvious, and if it was any other earthly immortal realm expert, the person might not be able to get past all this safely. But Chun Shi obtained great gains as well. This path all along the way allowed him to witness numerous restrictions and talisman formations he'd never seen in the past, and diffusing them was a type of tempering and improvement of his cultivation in the Tao of talismans. Especially when he diffused the last few terrifying restrictions at the end, they allowed his understanding of talisman formations to grow even more deeper, and if it wasn't for the restraint of his cultivation, he would be capable of comprehending immortal restrictions right now. Besides that, in terms of combat, the boundless demon beasts that his external avatars had killed all along the way allowed him to flawlessly and skillfully control his body refinement cultivation and might at the Nether Transformation realm. After all, the body refinement cultivation Chen Shi's main body possessed a few days ago was only at the perfection stage of the rebirth realm. Now that this clone of his had advanced to the Nether Transformation realm, then no matter if it was cultivation or shaman energy, it had undergone a tremendous qualitative change. This was an entirely new realm, so he naturally required time to properly temper and grasp it. When he thought about it carefully, the combat strength of his clone was roughly on par with his main body. After all the divine abilities he'd mastered were top existences in the 3 dimensions, and every single realm of improvement in his cultivation would allow the might exerted by a divine ability to double. For example, the Eye of Divine Truth, the Stellar Lightning Form, and the Grand Astral Palm, all of them were practically unique and supreme existences in the world, and coupled with auxiliary divine abilities like the Heavenly Transformation and Deity Transformation, their might would increase even more. All of this had predetermined how formidable the combat strength of Chun Shi's clone would be. Unfortunately, my main body is recuperating within the world of stars now. Otherwise, if I merge with this clone, then the strength I'd be able to exert would surely improve greatly. The bottom of this river was extremely flat, and the ground was completely barren and paved with strange rocks that were extremely pitch black and hard. After he arrived here, there weren't any more restrictions nor boundless demon beasts, and the environment was silent and desolate to the extreme. According to the path on the treasure map that Chun Shi remembered, he only had to move forward along a secret path at the bottom of the river and reach its end before he would be able to arrive at the outer area of the Sky Tao Palace's treasure vault. But he didn't make a move right away, and he chose a place to meditate and recover his strength instead. One day later, Chun Shi awoke from his meditation, and he stood up before flashing out without the slightest hesitation. When looked at from the outside world, this river was only a few thousand kilometers in length, but a secret path at its bottom actually seemed to be endless and extremely deep. Moreover, as he continued forward, Chun Shi noticed that the terrain of this secret path was extending deeper downwards, and it seemed as if it led to the netherworld because it was completely pitch black and horrifying. Even though he hadn't encountered any danger all along the way, Chun Shi didn't dare be careless in the slightest, and he swept the surroundings with the Eye of Divine Truth as he moved forward extremely vigilantly. After the time for an incense stick to burn, He suddenly stopped moving while the eye of divine truth between his brows flashed, and a wisp of a piercingly cold sheen slipped past it. Why is it like this? The drawing of an old sovereign reading the scripture, the drawing of a black tortoise shaking the earth, the drawing of a dragon and tiger in the form of yin and yang. Why have they all vanished? I clearly remember that all these ancient paintings were branded on the walls the last time I came here. Wait, someone has surely come here. It couldn't be that someone else similarly obtained this treasure map before me, right? Or perhaps, it isn't just me who possesses this treasure map. Suddenly, a wave of muttering sounded out from afar, and it came and went from time to time. Due to the distance being too far, it seemed to be extremely indistinct, like the droning of a mosquito. It's actually him. No wonder. So it turns out that he hid in here. Xianxia silently transformed into a ray of light that approached the source of the voice. This was a stone wall that was covered in dark gray-colored moss. A 9 m tall stone door had been opened up at the center of the rock wall. The surface of the stone door was carved with countless ancient drawings, and after experiencing the corrosion of time, it had already been extremely indistinct since a long time ago and was impossible to distinguish. At this moment, a small crack was opened up on this stone door, and a strand of gentle light spilled out from within, allowing Xianxia to clearly see the scene behind the stone door. Obviously, this was the end of the secret path. Right? It completely fits the place marked on the treasure map, and I'll arrive at the outer area of the treasure vault upon entering through there. Xianxia approached silently. He noticed to his surprise that there was actually a shapeless force field behind the stone door, and it completely blocked out the river water from outside, but it didn't obstruct people from entering. What a magnificent hall! He raised his eyes and looked over, and he noticed that an extremely empty hall was actually present behind the stone door. The walls of the hall had numerous bronze lanterns hung upon it, and they were lit up with WRM oil wax that burned forever. They emanated a gentle sheen that illuminated the entire hall. When one stood within the hall, one was like an ant and seemed to be extremely tiny. At this moment, there was a tall figure standing before a wall at the left side of the hall, and he seemed to be staring blankly in a daze as he looked up at the wall. This person wore a violet robe, had a dignified expression, and seemed towering like a mountain. It was the owner of Marquis Wen's estate, Wen Tianxua. Early on, when he slaughtered Elder Yunju, Xianxia didn't find a single trace of this person, and Xianxia thought that he'd fled from terror since a long time ago. Yet never had Xianxia imagined that Wen Tianxua would actually have hid inside here. But hiding here was actually very safe. At the very least, it would really be difficult for an ordinary person to pass through the dense layers upon layers of restrictions and the obstruction of demon beasts within the river. The only thing that Xianxia felt curious about was that even he had traveled so arduously to arrive here. So how could Wen Tianxua, that was only at the second level of the earthly immortal realm, be able to arrive here as well? After all, according to his knowledge towards the last 3 restrictions within the river, it was absolutely impossible for Wen Tianxua alone to traverse them. This old goat really concealed it well. He was obviously able to arrive here because he possesses something else to rely on. A wisp of coldness suffused the corners of Xianxia's mouth, and he stopped hesitating and flashed through the stone door. Alas, if the Heavenflow Dao sect didn't interfere, then perhaps I'd have entered the treasure vault with that kid a long time ago. How could so many setbacks have occurred? Within the hall, Wen Tianxua withdrew his gaze, and he seemed to have thought of something, causing him to frown and sigh without end. "Do you regret it?" A voice resounded out by his ears, causing Wen Tianxua to answer without thinking. Of course. After that, his expression froze as he raised his head with shock, and then he saw a tall figure had actually entered the hall and stood far away in the distance without him noticing it. This figure wore an apricot yellow Taoist robe, had a handsome appearance, and an extraordinary bearing. It was exactly Xianxia. You, why are you still alive?" When Tianxua's pupils constricted abruptly as if he'd seen a ghost, and even his speech started to stutter. "Even a shameless fellow that repays kindness with enmity like you is still alive. So how could I dare to die?" Xianxia said indifferently. "I don't regret rescuing everyone in your estate, and I only regret not being able to kill you earlier." Now it would seem like even the heavens couldn't allow it to happen, and it intentionally arranged for us to meet here. Even though his tone was calm, it caused Wen Tianxua's heart to tremble while his face went pale, and by the time she finished speaking, Wen Tianxua actually knelt on the ground with a thump. I was forced to do all of this by the Heaven Flow Dao sect. I swear to the heavens that this was absolutely not my own intentions. Young Hero Chun, please show mercy and spare my life. Wen Tianxua had a sorrowful expression as he kowtowed and howled loudly without end. If he didn't see it with his own 2 eyes, even Xianxia would find it absolutely difficult to imagine that an earthly immortal realm expert would actually disregard his dignity, bow down, and kneel on the ground and kowtow like a pitiable fellow to beg for mercy. A dignified marquis, 2nd-level earthly immortal realm expert, and overlord of an area like Wen Tianxua knelt on the ground and kowtowed with a sorrowful expression like a pitiable little maggot. If this were to be known by the public, it would surely cause their jaws to fall. But she wasn't moved, and he felt this fellow seemed to be too shameless and lacking in backbone. Up until this moment, he was still avoiding taking responsibility and pushed it all onto the Heaven Flow Dao sect. So she wondered how such a figure cultivated to the earthly immortal realm. Young Hero Chun, my crimes deserve death, but I can swear to the heavens that from the beginning until the end, I had absolutely no intention of harming you. I only hope that you can let me off. Wen Tianxua begged with a dejected expression and a pitiful voice. Even you've noticed that the Sky Dao Palace's treasure vault is only a step away. So long as you let me off, I'm willing to give up the entire treasure vault to you. I'll similarly be able to obtain the entire treasure vault after killing you. Xi's expression remained unchanged as he said indifferently, actually, I intended to slaughter you and hang your corpse on the walls of Corona City to show the public. Before he could finish speaking, Wen Tianxua's expression had changed greatly as he cried out, then young Hero Chun intends to spare me now? She shook his head. You can't escape a disaster of your own making. Wen Tianxua had a ghastly expression as he muttered without end. Could it be that this is the sorrows of a nobody? I couldn't afford to offend the Heaven Flow Dao sect, yet I'm not tolerated by your 9 Radiant Sword sect. As he spoke, he suddenly charged out from the ground with palms that were like blades that suddenly slashed fiercely at Xi's dantian. This strike could be said to be sudden and impossible to guard against. If it was another, that person would absolutely not have expected Wen Tianxua would actually launch a surprise attack at a time like this. Moreover, his actions were so resolute, ruthless, decisive, and without the slightest hesitation, causing it to carry the essence of a sneak attack. However, she seemed to have expected all of this long ago. As soon as Wen Tianxua made a move, his right palm swung down like a mountain crushing down, and he struck before Wen Tianxua. Wen Tianxua's head was smashed apart like a watermelon, causing brain matter to spray all over. Besides that, his arms that he'd just lifted fell weakly from midair, and then his entire body fell to the ground with a thump. This strike had completely destroyed his soul core and body, causing it to be impossible for him to have any chance of resurrection. I knew that as an overlord, how could you accept your fate so easily? Unfortunately, you still died in the end. You can't blame it on anyone but yourself for repaying kindness with enmity. She shook his head before moving his gaze towards the walls in the surroundings of the hall. The hall was empty and without the slightest decorations. Only those 4 walls of it still faintly revealed numerous drawings like landscape, flowers, birds, insects, fish, the star, the moon, stars, and so on and so forth that were inscribed on them. But the strange thing was that the core of these drawings had been forcefully stripped off by someone, and it only left behind some decorative drawings of sceneries. Merely from its outward appearance, it was utterly impossible to discern if it possessed any value. She recalled the drawings of an old sovereign reading the scripture, the drawing of a black tortoise shaking the earth, the drawing of a dragon and tiger in the form of yin and yang, and so on and so forth that Wen Tianxua had mentioned, and he couldn't help but mutter. Could it be really as he said? Someone has been here before, and that person cleaned out everything within this hall. She pondered briefly before his gaze descended towards the deepest depths of the hall. At that place was a door, and according to the records of the treasure map, the only path that led to the treasure vault was behind the door. Swoosh! Without wasting any more time, Xianxia transformed into a wisp of flowing light and charged directly into the door. After he entered the door, the first thing that entered his eyes was a lake. It was enormous and possessed clear water with numerous lotus flowers floating on it. The lotus flowers had leaves that were crimson red in color, and it blazed like flames and was suffused with divine radiance. However, the flowers had been gathered by someone a long time ago. Crimson ray flame streak lotuses. These are precious treasures of the heavens and the earth, and a single lotus flower is comparable to a quasi-immortal weapon in value. Now, this enormous area of flowers has actually been gathered completely. Xianxia frowned, and then he moved past the lake to notice a garden. The garden had fertile soil and was suffused with dense immortal energy that assaulted his face. Moreover, there were various spirit materials and spirit medicines that flickered with bright lights and were faintly dyed with a brilliant glow. This was probably a herb garden, and it was filled with numerous precious and aged medicine that were rare in the world, and some had even become extinct in the outside world, like the violet vortex soul recover herb, the silverspit gold eye flower, and so on and so forth. Even if it was in the 9 Radiant Sword sect, this herb garden was rare, and if it did exist, it would surely be guarded closely. But now, the spirit medicines and spirit materials within this herb garden revealed signs of withering. The fruits, flowers, stems, and roots that were of shocking worth had already been completely gathered, and only a mess was left behind. Xianxia kept silent and continued forward when he saw this. All along the way, he saw numerous lofty and ancient palaces. Some were medicinal pill halls, treasures weapon halls, scripture halls, martial practice malls, and so on and so forth. Every single one of them was extremely magnificent and suffused with a solemn and ancient aura. But these halls were mostly empty and covered in a mess. It was like a group of extremely greedy bandits had plundered it, dug 3 feet into the ground, and completely cleaned it out to the point nothing remained. Looks like someone has really arrived before me, and this person's methods are actually so ruthless. He didn't even leave some scraps for me. No matter how composed Xianxia was, he couldn't help but reveal a gloomy expression after witnessing these scenes. Presently, he could already be sure that this place was undoubtedly related to the Sky Dao Palace, and it might even be the place the sect resided. Now, everything here had been completely cleaned out by someone, so how could Xianxia not be depressed? After all, the Sky Dao Palace was one of the 10 great immortal sects all those years ago, so how shocking would the treasures left behind by it be? It was immeasurable. It was obvious just by looking at the current 9 Radiant Sword sect. As an extraordinary power in the Dark Reverie, there was an enormous amount of various treasures and inheritances within too, and it wasn't exaggerated to describe it as vast like an ocean and dense like a river of stars. It was even to the extent that Xianxia dared say with certainty that if all the treasures he'd seen all along the way here were added together, it would be sufficient to establish a great power and start a sect. Not to mention him, even other earthly immortal realm experts or a figure that was a sect master of a power would probably be filled with rage. Fortunately, this is merely the outer area, and the true treasure vault of the Sky Dao Palace has probably not been discovered. After all, the key to the treasure vault is still in my possession. As he thought like this, the depression in his heart eased up greatly. He didn't hesitate any longer and stopped exploring as well, and he directly flashed swiftly towards the depths of the area according to the indications on the treasure map. After the time for an incense stick to burn, according to Xianxia's speed, he'd flown for at least a few tens of thousands of kilometers before he'd arrived before an ancient group of buildings. This was the final location recorded on the treasure map. Xianxia glanced over and noticed that the surroundings of these buildings were covered in a shapeless restriction that separated it from the world, and it was like the end of the world with no path forward. These sort of restrictions were extremely terrifying. It seemed like a dimensional wall that forcefully split apart this expanse of the world, and it was interwoven with countless laws of the Heaven Dao, so not to mention Xianxia, even a heavenly immortal would find it impossible to surmount. Swoosh! Xianxia flew up into the sky and looked down below, and he saw an extremely shocking scene. The 8 ancient palaces were in a circle and in the position of the 8 trigrams. Every single ancient palace revealed a different style, and they cooperated with each other from a distance to guard the surroundings. There were 4 sacrificial altars at the center of the 8 palaces. The sacrificial altars were completely constructed from limestone, and they were ancient like towers that were used to offer sacrifice to the heavens. They stood in the position of the four symbols, and they guarded the surroundings. There were two rivers flowing between the four sacrificial altars, and it was like two dragons that wound about just like the circulation of yin and yang, causing the area to carry profoundness internally while reflecting the four symbols and 8 trigrams from the outside. If it was just like this, then this expanse of buildings couldn't be considered to be too magnificent, and they were only an extremely ordinary and small composition only. But to Xianxia's surprise, this river of yin flowed crisscross through the 4 sacrificial altars and took the position of water in the 5 elements, whereas the river of yang intersected with the 8 palaces to take the central position in the 9 palaces of the 8 trigrams. Because of the circulation of the yin and yang river, a composition that was originally extremely ordinary had caused the atmosphere within this entire group of buildings to become extraordinary. It was grand, magnificent, and contained boundless evolving profundities, causing it to seem like it embraced the fortune of the world within it. Even with Xianxia's knowledge in the Tao of Talismans, he couldn't help but be shocked in his heart upon witnessing this scene. For example, the great achievement of utilizing the formation to the limit like this and having it synchronize with the heavens and the earth could absolutely be called as something that shocked the world. But no matter if it was the palaces, sacrificial altars, or the rivers of yin and yang, all of them could only be considered as external forces, and the Tao platforms at the center were the true core of the formation. Amazing! Small details tell a great picture. The Sky Tao Palace surely possessed extraordinary and superior attainments in the Tao of Talismans. I wonder why such a power would vanish overnight. Logically speaking, the greater the attainments in the Tao of Talismans, the deeper its knowledge towards the circulation of the workings of the heavens. Putting aside predicting the future and deducing fate, they would at least be able to turn calamities into blessings. Xianxia pondered briefly yet was unable to wrap his head around it. So he shook his head and flashed past the 8 palaces to fly directly towards the Tao platforms at the absolute center. The Tao platforms were ancient and ordinary. They only covered an area of 300 m and were branded all over with the corrosion of time and mottled marks. Xianxia stood amongst them and couldn't help but feel a heavy and solemn atmosphere. He faintly seemed to see a Taoist sitting cross-legged on a meditation cushion with a carefree appearance and was passing down the Tao. All the disciples by his side were either seated or standing in a carefree manner, and they were either pondering silently, seemed to be lost in thought, or were beaming. The Grand Tao is shapeless, nameless, without logic, and without interest. Those that are lost within it take the heavens as the Tao, immortality as the Tao, and the laws as the Tao. Then what would be outside the heavens, above immortality, and within the laws? Man seeks the Tao all through the entire heavens and the earth, yet it isn't in the heavens, the earth, immortality or mortality. It's only in the hearts of all. If there is wisdom in one's heart, then everything in the world carries the Tao, and the boundless universe would only be a grain of sand wherever one's heart was directed at. A wave of a voice that was grand like the chime of a bell faintly resounded out by his ear, and it was thought-provoking and pointed straight towards the heart, causing Xianxia to be stunned instantaneously. This Tao platform was exceedingly extraordinary. Since time immemorial, countless great figures of the Sky Tao Palace had studied through books and records and imparted knowledge here. So an aura of the Grand Tao that was impossible to be erased had naturally been left behind here. As time passed, this Tao platform seemed as if it had gained an intelligence of its own. The tune of the Grand Tao drifted by his ears, and it seemed like the sound of nature that resounded from the horizon, or the emotional sighs of sages from the boundless ages, and it caused Xianxia to be dazed and unconsciously sit cross-legged at the center of the Tao platform. At this moment, he seemed like an ignorant child that had just heard about the path to immortality. He was muddled, perplexed, and he didn't know where the path began and where it ended. But he naturally conformed with the aura of the Grand Tao on this Tao platform and conformed with the entire world. His body effused strands of aura of the Tao that glowed lustrously, and it was pure and flawless. The vital energy in his entire body moved along with this, and it just happened to move naturally like the fluctuating clouds in the horizon. In merely an instant, the Tao platform was suffused with strands of divine radiance, while golden lotuses emerged from the ground and flowers fell from the sky, and it drowned Xianxia within them. He sat cross-legged amongst it, and the strands of golden radiance emitted from the golden lotuses coiled around his body. A strand of strange fluctuations stretched out into the surroundings like a ripple, and the calm yin and yang rivers started surging and circulating, whereas the 4 sacrificial altars even emanated strands of dazzling flames that seemed like the divine flames of sacrifice had been lighted up. Later on, even the 8 palaces that resided on the location of the 8 trigrams emanated divine rays of light that were like bridges that connected to the heavens, and they converged past the 4 sacrificial altars and the rivers of yin and yang to link up around the Tao platform. If one looked down from the sky, one would see the entire surroundings of the Tao platform was already filled with the qi of yin and yang, the energy of the 4 symbols, and the spirit of the 8 trigrams. It emanated a myriad of divine radiance that was brilliant and vast, dreamlike and mysterious. Swoosh! Suddenly, a small beast tunneled out from the nearby space as if it had appeared out of thin air. And from the beginning until the end, it actually didn't care the slightest fluctuation in space. It was a little over 30 centimeters in height, and it looked very much like a tiny brown bear. Its fur was golden in color, soft and smooth, and it revealed a naive and dazed appearance. Oh, so it isn't Master who is giving lessons, but this kid is furtively comprehending the Tao. The little bear shook its head with a disappointed expression, and it had a downcast mood. It placed its pair of paws behind its back while sizing Xianxia up repeatedly, and then suddenly recalled something and slapped itself on the head. How could I have forgotten? It has already been so long, so it's impossible for Master, senior brothers and senior sisters to come back again. As it spoke, it sat down right in midair before tears streamed down its face, and it was like an ignorant child that was suddenly unable to find the way home and cried extremely sorrowfully. The strange thing was, even though it was crying, the little bear actually didn't make the slightest sound, let alone alarm Xianxia. After quite some time had passed, the little bear suddenly stopped crying and wiped its eyes before its plump and small body stood up, and then it strode up and down while muttering with a confused expression. Wait! I remember Master left word that if someone came over, then, alas, I still can't remember. No wonder Master said that I'm simple-minded. It shook its head and stopped thinking any further before staring with clear eyes at Xianxia while a gaze filled with curiosity. Swoosh! Not long after, the little bear seemed to have noticed something, and it vanished with a swish. At this moment, Xianxia awoke as well. From the beginning until the end, he was entirely unaware that a strange little beast had examined him from a close distance for a very long time earlier. Presently, his heart was tranquil and empty, whereas all the comprehensions he'd obtained in these past few days had been condensed, consolidated, and improved a step further. Moreover, his body had become even more filled with spirit, and not only was it firm and seemingly eternal, it had even merged with the Tao like a true product of the Tao. It was pure, translucent, and every single inch of his skin was suffered with strands of the aura of the Tao. In a sense, this was more important than advancing in cultivation because this was the accumulation of potential and the development of the boundless mysterious energy contained within the tiny apertures in his body. He would sooner or later be able to open up the divine treasure vault which was his body, and he would soar into the sky to attain the brilliance of attaining immortality of the body. From this moment onward, the body refinement of Xianxia's clone had become even smoother because his body was purified, became pure like a product of the Tao, and had merged with the Tao. Xianxia opened his eyes and gradually let out a mouthful of air. I never expected that a simple Tao platform would actually be able to easily allow me to fall into a state of Tao comprehension. If I were to listen to the ancestors of the Sky Tao Palace personally pass down the Tao, then I wonder how miraculous it would be. Xianxia stood up and swept the surroundings with his gaze, and he noticed to his surprise that the rivers of yin and yang, the sacrificial altars, and the 8 palaces had actually moved aside, and they seemed to be exactly the same as before, but their auras were completely different. Most shocking to him was a door had actually appeared on the ground of the Tao platform he stood on, and it was pitch black like a bottomless abyss and had a limestone stairway that led directly into it, Could it be that the true treasure vault of the Sky Dao Palace is beneath this? Xianxia's brows raised because he hadn't noticed this door when he arrived here earlier. Could it be that the appearance of this door is related to my comprehension of the Dao? Xianxia pondered for a short moment before immediately walking towards the door. This place was too mysterious and impossible to guess, so it was better to make a trip himself than ponder bitterly up here. This limestone stairway went extremely deep, and it wound all the way down. After walking downwards for an entire 10 minutes, his field of vision suddenly brightened up while an ancient Taoist temple appeared before him. The Taoist temple was really ancient, and it was constructed from golden thatch and coarse stones, and the words Sky Dao Palace was written on a wooden plaque that hung above the building made of thatch. It seemed to have experienced the corrosion of countless of years, causing the plaque to have decayed a long time ago, and even the words on it were blurred and incomplete, and it was almost impossible to recognize. Xianxia was astounded. Could it be that this is the Sky Dao Palace's treasure vault? He turned around to size up the surroundings, and he noticed that in this entire space, there was only this single Taoist temple in the form of a thatched house, and there was nothing else. After that, Xianxia was surprised. When he walked down the final step of the stairway to arrive here, he'd actually sensed an indescribable, imposing aura. It was grand, divine, and even carried the prestige of the Grand Tao, and it was extremely solemn and dignified to the point it caused his soul to be slightly stunned. This sort of feeling caused his heart to palpitate. After all, the soul core of his clone had already recovered to his prime state since a long time ago, and it was on par with an earthly immortal realm expert. But now, his soul had actually become slightly stunned from the imposing aura that coiled around this thatched house, and this was too unusual. Xianxia took a deep breath and circulated his cultivation before it allowed his soul to calm down greatly, and he noticed there was a lock placed horizontally before the tightly closed door to the thatched house, causing it to be impossible for him to see its contents clearly. This lock was long and like a hook, and it was mottled with rust. Moreover, it had been utilized here for countless years because the rust on it was even on the verge of falling off. A simply thatched house, a decayed plaque, a long lock mottled with rust. All of this made it seem like it wasn't a place that cultivators resided, and even if it was placed in the mortal world, such a house would probably have been abandoned a long time ago. If this thatched house was constructed from precious treasures of the heavens and the earth and decorated with precious treasures, then its ability to emanate such an aura was normal. But it was constructed of extremely ordinary materials, yet was able to emit such a grand and divine aura. The more it was like this, the more it caused this place to seem unusual. Xianxia knew as well that the ordinary plants and flowers at the residence of some great figures would be affected by the aura of these great figures, and it would carry a strand of spirit and the aura of the Tao after years of accumulation. This was like transforming stones into gold and jade, or transforming something ordinary into something extraordinary. This ability was even more formidable than touching stone and turning it into gold, and it was practically something that only an expert at the heavenly immortal realm or above could accomplish. Most shocking to Xianxia was the size of the long lock on the door just happened to fit the sky key in his possession. All of this seemed like it was a sign that the simply thatched house Taoist temple was the location of the Sky Dao Palace's treasure vault. Xianxia stopped hesitating and withdrew the sky key before intending to walk forward and open the door. Swoosh! However, right at this moment, a black shadow flashed, and it directly seized away the sky key in his hand before he could even react. Xianxia's entire body went stiff as he felt a chill run down his spine. Since he'd started cultivating until now, his combat strength was already sufficient to annihilate an earthly immortal realm expert. Yet now, he actually had a treasure in his hand seized instantaneously from him. Moreover, he didn't even have the chance to react. How terrifying is the cultivation of the person who did this? Would I be able to dodge if this person launched a surprise attack against me? Instantly, Xianxia broke out in a cold sweat while the nerves in his entire body became strained like a fully drawn bow, and he was absolutely vigilant as he looked towards the side. But he couldn't help but be stunned when he saw the appearance of this person clearly. A little brown bear? In the distance, a 30 centimeters tall, gold-furred, and plump little fellow was exactly like an ordinary and common brown bear. At this moment, Its chubby paws were holding the sky key while it sat cross-legged in midair, and it seemed charmingly naive, very cute, and without the slightest aura of danger. Ha ha! I remember now. Master took this key with him when he left, and if it wasn't for this, I would have left this place a long time ago to go look for my senior brothers and senior sisters. The little gold bear didn't pay any attention to Xianxia at all, and it rubbed its head while laughing with a silly expression on its face. And then with a stretch of its neck, a golden little lock actually appeared between its fur. It took up the sky key and pushed it towards the tiny lock. Xianxia was shocked. This golden lock is only the size of a duck egg, but the sky key is an entire 30 m in length. How could it possibly be the key to open that lock? Don't! Xianxia shouted loudly right away. He was truly worried that this little beast would damage the sky key because in that way, how would he open up the door to the thatched house? Why? The little gold bear stopped and asked. That isn't the key to open the golden lock on your neck, and it's the key to open that. Xianxia explained patiently. He'd already discerned that this little bear with golden fur seemed to not have any ill intent towards him, so he felt slightly at ease. The little gold bear was stunned, and then it gazed towards the nearby thatched house. It was a mystery what it had recalled, but the little bear's expression suddenly became agitated, and then it leaped up and roared. Master said that place must never be opened. That's the source of sin. The source of sin. Xianxia's eyes narrowed, and he was slightly surprised and doubtful. The aura of this thatched house is grand and divine, so how could it possibly have the source of sin sealed up within it? He knew very clearly that the so-called source of sin was the source of all upheavals, calamity, and disasters, and it was condensed from the energies of evil, curses, sin, and so on and so forth. Just like the grand Tao of the heavens and the earth, sin was a type of quintessence energy as well. So long as the myriad of beings in the world possessed intelligence, and there was yin and yang in the world, then the energy of sin would never dissipate. Just like light and darkness promoted each other, yin and yang opposed each other, and good and evil fought each other. The existence of sin was the opposite of righteousness, and it was impossible to be eliminated by the roots. But this sort of energy wasn't tolerated by the heaven Tao, and it was rejected by the people of the world. In the countless years of the past, this quintessence energy had long since been suppressed by righteous of the world and buried in history. All in all, the source of sin was too ethereal, and it existed in the bottom of the hearts of the myriad of living creatures and within every single thing in the world. But when it was all converged together, its might was sufficient to drown the entire world. Presently, that little gold bear had actually said the source of sin was sealed within this thatched house. So how could Xianxia not be shocked? Oh, in short, just don't open it up. The little bear scratched its head and chuckled when it saw Xianxia remain silent. Right, senior brother, why have you only come now? I've been waiting so long for you. As it spoke, it held out its paw and started counting the time. 100 years? 1,000 years? 10,000 years? Oh, it has been too long. I've already forgotten. Xianxia stared his eyes wide open and said with astonishment, Who's your senior brother? The little bear was even more astounded and said, Senior brother? Was it not Master that asked you to come get me? Xianxia was dizzy, and he said while staring blankly, Which master? He did have masters of his own. Madman Lu could be considered as one, the master of the manor, Fuxi, could be considered as another. But he'd never known when he got such a muddle-headed junior brother. Oh, never mind. I'll open up this heaven-imprisoning Tao shackles before chatting with senior brother. As the little bear spoke, it raised up the sky Tao and pushed it towards the golden lock on its neck. But right after that, it seemed to have noticed something and suddenly stopped what it was doing before it said with an anxious expression, Senior brother, hide. Quickly. Xianxia swept the surroundings with his gaze, yet saw nothing out of the ordinary, and he said, Why must I hide? As soon as he finished speaking, he felt something flash before his eyes, and then his entire body was enveloped by a strange force, causing his body to uncontrollably drift up and actually enter within space. This sort of feeling was too miraculous. It was like a space had been forcefully opened up within a tiny area, and he and the little bear were standing upright within this space. You? Xianxia opened his mouth and hadn't finished speaking before a fluffy paw had tightly covered his mouth. Senior brother. That bad guy from before has returned. The little bear held onto Xianxia's neck and its 30 centimeters tall figure hung on Xianxia, causing it to seem like a fluffy doll as it said mysteriously, "You must not speak because even I'm no match for him if we're noticed." Xianxia finally confirmed one thing. This little bear seemed to have lived for very long, but its disposition was ignorant and naive to the extreme. To put it nicely, the little bear could be said to have the innocent heart of a child, and to put it bluntly, it was simple-minded, and the little bear could compete with Axiu. Swoosh! Suddenly, a black shadow flashed out from the stairway, and it instantly arrived before the thatched house. This figure seemed like a god bathed in flames. Its entire body was coiled in the glow of flames, while only revealed a pair of brilliant and sparkling eyes that were even more dazzling than the glow of flames. And it seemed as if this figure could incinerate the sky and awe the world. Even with Xianxia's current cultivation, his heart couldn't help but constrict while he felt suffocated. It really has appeared. I've been lingering here for many days and have searched the various palaces. Yet I've never found the location of the true treasure vault. I never imagined that it would be here. The man that was bathed in divine flames started laughing when he saw the Taoist temple in the form of a thatched house, and his laughter was very cold, indifferent, and deep, whereas the crimson-red flames in his eyes grew even brighter, as if capable of incinerating everything in the world. Xianxia's heart shook when he heard this, and then he recalled the mess he saw all along the way and couldn't help but think to himself, "Looks like this bastard is the fellow that cleaned out the various palaces and herb gardens." But most shocking of it all was that the little bear had executed some sort of profound technique to actually completely cover up their figures and auras, causing the extremely formidable man that was bathed in divine flames to be actually unable to notice them. Humph! I knew that Tao platform wasn't ordinary, and if it wasn't for it being protected by the aura of the grand Tao that was left behind through the boundless ages, how could this have possibly been hidden from me? The man was bathed in divine flames as he took a step forward to arrive before the thatched house, and he lowered his eyes to look at the iron lock that was mottled with rust on the tightly closed door before he muttered, "The treasure vault of the Sky Tao Palace is probably within here. I'll be able to make all preparations before the upheaval of the 3 dimensions once I obtain it. At that time, all the natives of the dark reverie can wait to be slaughtered and ruled." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand, causing a myriad of flaming glows to surge out from his body and envelop the tightly closed door before him, and then it burned violently. A xeno-race expert. Xianxia's eyes constricted abruptly when he heard this, and then a wisp of shock surged out from his heart as he'd recognized that the middle-aged man bathed in the glow of flames was probably a xeno-race expert. Moreover, this middle-aged man was a great figure that possessed authority over others. The middle-aged man's strength was at least at the general rank, and it was even possible for him to be at the marquis rank. The marquis rank was an existence that was comparable with a true heavenly immortal. Why would a great figure of the xenorace make his way here? Xianxia had a serious expression because the appearance of this middle-aged man caused him to become even more aware of how urgent the situation was. It seemed that since the moment the dark parasol's abyss opened, the 3 dimensions had already started to be put into the situation of an upheaval. "Eh? You actually dare to resist me?" A wisp of a baleful expression couldn't help but appear between the brows of the middle-aged man when he saw the burning of his divine flames were unable to break through an utterly decayed door, and he couldn't restrain himself any longer, causing the imposing aura in his entire body to rumble before it actually rose explosively by a great deal. It felt as if he'd opened up a seal on his body, causing his strength to rise steadily, and an aura that was even more terrifying than a heavenly immortal seeped out from his body. At this moment, this man was like the overlord of the world while divine flames charged into the sky from all over his body, causing him to be terrifying to the extreme and simply be on par with the white-haired xenorace Saint Emperor Chun she had seen within the door of profundity within the dark parasol's abyss. Ethereal divine flame, incinerate the heavens. The man shouted angrily while his hands seemed as if they were embracing a scorching sun, and he fiercely slapped down onto the iron lock that was mottled with rust. Bang! An enormous bang shook the heavens while the iron lock that emanated a grand and divine aura trembled and seemed to be on the verge of shattering, causing the man to instantly reveal an overjoyed expression. And then his figure flashed while he was about to execute a profound technique to blast open the iron lock in one go. But right at this moment, a tiny gap was revealed at the edge of the tightly closed door, and then a strange force surged out soundless before instantly suppressing the entire strength of the man. At this instant, even Xianxia's entire body trembled as he felt an indescribably evil aura surge into his heart, causing the blood in his entire body to seem to be on the verge of stagnating, while his heart was enveloped within an enormous shadow. Exactly how terrifying is the energy of sin within this thatched house? Xianxia was unable to imagine it. The great xenorace figure was obviously shocked while a wisp of panic appeared within his eyes, and his figure retreated explosively as he seemed to have sensed danger and intended to avoid it temporarily. Right at this moment, a strand of black gas suddenly emerged from the gap on the door, and it transformed into a deathly gray-colored palm that emanated an extremely decaying, evil, and gloomy aura. Bang! This palm stretched out like an ancient fiend god that was about to be resurrected, and it carried a myriad of strands of the energy of sin as it descended once more into the world and tainted it. The source of sin? No. Why would such a damnable force exist in the world? Could it be that the upheaval of the three dimensions this time will cause the three dimensions to experience an unprecedented calamity? The man was greatly astounded as he turned and fled without hesitating in the slightest. The appearance of the source of sin caused him to sense a fatal threat as well. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. The deathly gray palm that was suffused with the aura of decay and sin enveloped down while the man's body was forcefully pinned down by an imperceptible and enormous force, causing him to stop in midair. Bang! The man's right hand was invaded by the energy of sin, causing it to explode instantaneously, and the intense pain and astonishment he felt caused him to let out an extremely miserable shrill cry. After all, this was a great xenorace figure that was more terrifying than a heavenly immortal. Yet now, he was actually suppressed by merely a strand of the quintessence energy of sin. It felt like a fiend god trampling upon an ant, and it caused Xianxia to feel a chill run down his spine and feel as if he'd fallen into an icy pit. Such a terrifying force had already exceeded his understanding. Damn it! Damn it! Ethereal arts, sacrifice my blood and spirit, and use my soul to grab a chance at survival. The man roared with terror and fury before suddenly spitting out a mouthful of blood essence, causing the divine flames around his body to burn even more strongly. And then he actually struggled free of the restraints on him with a bang before transforming into a fiery shadow that vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye. Bang! Right when the xenorace expert had just fled, the deathly gray-colored palm didn't return back behind the door, and it fiercely grabbed towards the point in space where Xianxia and the little bear were standing in. Instantly, he felt an indescribable aura of death, resentment, evil, and sin envelop his body and mind, and even the shaman energy, true essence, and divine sense in his body was sealed up. All of this seemed to have lost their effect beneath the envelopment of this palm, and it was the first time he'd encountered such a situation. Could it be that I'm going to be buried here today? Xianxia tried his best to circulate all the strength in his body, yet he noticed to his despair that all struggling was futile before this force. The might of the Sky Tao, the technique of mystery, eliminate the unreal and slaughter evil. Suppress. Right at this critical moment, the little bear by his side suddenly made a move. It held the sky key in its hand and caused the sky key to tear through the sky like a sharp sword as it directly slashed at the gray-colored palm. The sky key was 30 centimeters long and clear blue like the sky. Its surface was covered in numerous mysterious talisman markings, and it emanated spots of starry azure brilliance that were extremely resplendent. At this moment, the little gold bear used it as a sword and slashed out with it, causing the entire key to suddenly erupt with a myriad of rays of clear radiance that whistled out and directly blasted the palm away. Bang! An enormous and muffled bang resounded out while the deathly gray palm that was coiled with the decaying aura of death dispersed with a rumble, and it transformed into strands of the deathly chi that was actually completely crushed by this strike and dissipated into nothingness. Xianxia watched this scene with a lingering fear in his heart after escaping death. Never had he imagined that the little gold bear was so extraordinary to the point that the energy of sin that even a great figure from outside the three dimensions was helpless against would be crushed with a single strike from it. Swoosh! Before Xianxia could recover from his shock, the little bear had suddenly transformed into a ray of flowing light that appeared before the thatched house, and its paws formed seals repeatedly. Numerous mysterious talisman markings poured out from his hand and actually completely sealed the tiny gap revealed on the door once again. That scared me to death. The source of sin almost escaped. After finishing all this, the little bear heaved a long sigh of relief, and its paws patted its chest while it revealed an appearance of having a lingering fear. Xianxia stared blankly at this because he was utterly unable to connect this charmingly naive little golden bear with a peerless expert. After all, that scene from before was simply too terrifying, and even he didn't possess the slightest ability to resist. But the little bear had merely utilized a single strike to shatter that palm. So exactly how formidable was the little bear's strength? Amazing! Truly amazing! Xianxia couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Senior brother is too kind. The little bear chuckled, and it seemed to be slightly embarrassed from being praised and used its chubby paws to scratch its head repeatedly. What's your name? Xianxia asked curiously. Master named me Huang Manor. My senior brothers and senior sisters call me Amon. The little bear answered frankly. Amon. Xianxia nodded, and then he said, Right. Why do you keep calling me senior brother? He was really curious because he could be sure now that the little bear was undoubtedly an inheritor of the Sky Dao Palace. But why did Amon call me senior brother the moment he met me? Could it be because of the Sky Key? Sure enough, the little bear answered like it was a matter of course. Master instructed me that the person who arrived here with the Sky Key in hand would surely be my senior brother. He paused for a moment and continued. Master also asked me to wait here until senior brother came because only the Sky Key in senior brother's hand would be able to open the heaven-imprisoning Dao shackles on my neck. As he spoke, he slapped himself on the head and cried out, Aya! How could I have forgotten to open it up? Senior brother, wait a moment. I'll chat with you after I've opened up this damnable lock that has locked me for countless years. The words of the little golden bear, Amon, were very illogical. He spoke everything that came to mind, and it caused Xianxia to be puzzled. Up until now, Xianxia still hadn't figured out the sequence of events. But he could be sure that this little fellow before him ought to have stayed here for a very long time, and it was for the sake of awaiting the senior brother that his master mentioned. It just so happened that Xianxia possessed the Sky Key, and he naturally became this senior brother. When he recalled Qian Yuan's treasure vault in the depths of the Darchu dynasty's oceanic desert, the figure of the Swanee with peerless divine might that he'd seen there, and the aged and grand voice he'd heard there, a flash of insight couldn't help but flash within Xianxia's mind. The owner of that Qian Yuan's treasure vault couldn't be Amon's master, right? And that Swanee might have been Amon's real senior brother? In the long primordial age and the brilliant years that passed, I lived and grew wildly and ferociously, and I finally obtained a good teacher that bestowed education upon me. He passed down extraordinary techniques to me and taught me Taoist scriptures, allowing the roots of my intelligence and Tao foundation to finally become established and live up to the expectations in the heart of my master, and I shed tears of gratitude because of this. My home, my roots, both are the Sky Dao Palace. Since this life is ending, I'll repay master in my next. Oh, respected master, don't forget this useless disciple. The voice of that Swanee before it's vanished seemed to resound once more in his ears. Every single word was resolute and powerful, and firmness that was impossible to be worn away was revealed within its grief. Xianxia inadvertently recalled the scene from all those years ago. The divine beast Swanee swept through all the experts, yet at the end, when it heard the aged voice, it transformed into a young youth in Taoist robes who had his hair coiled into a bun, and the young youth was incinerated within raging flames and vanished completely from the heavens and the earth. For no reason or rhyme, A wisp of a complicated feeling surged out into his heart. All those years ago during the trip to Qian Yuan's treasure vault, countless cultivators had entered the treasure vault and experienced 3 tests, and countless casualties had occurred during the tests. But when the tests really ended, everyone noticed that all the cultivators who'd perished during the tests actually didn't die, and they'd been concealed by the great ability of the divine beast Swanee. It was from that moment onward that Xianxia was attracted to the Sky Dao Palace because the treasure vault it left behind rewarded the Dao to those who were fated. Yet it didn't have any intention to harm others. Such broad-mindedness was something that could really be called the bearing and disposition of a great sect. He still remembered that he'd once sworn on that day, "If I'm able to obtain the contents of the Sky Dao Palace's secret vault in the future, I'll surely establish a sect and rebuild the Sky Dao Palace, allowing its flame to be passed down and exist forever in the heavens and the earth." Crack! A clear sound resounded out as the little gold bear, Amon, opened up the golden little lock on his neck. Roar! When this treasure called the heaven-imprisoning Dao shackles by him was opened, this charmingly naive little bear suddenly looked up into the sky and roared like a thunderclap that shook the world. Instantly, his 30 centimeters tall figure emanated peerlessly terrifying immortal energy, and with a rumble, his figure actually rose steadily to transform to a height of 30 kilometers in the blink of an eye. At this moment, Amon was like a demonic bear that was from the primeval times. His eyes were like 2 crimson-red lakes that reflected everything within the world, and it seemed like so long as he was willing, he could pierce through the sky with a raise of his hand and pluck the stars and moon from it. Xianxia was shocked as he looked up at this figure that was even taller than a mountain and seemed like a great fiend god that stood towering in the world. And he was completely unable to imagine that the muddle-headed little fellow from before had transformed into this, since he possesses such a terrifying, imposing aura. Exactly how formidable is his cultivation? "Oh, I forget that Master said I can only reveal my true form in battle. Otherwise, I'll be captured by bad people." Amon spoke with a droning voice, and then his figure shook as he swiftly transformed back into his 30 centimeters tall appearance. Captured by bad people? Xianxia was speechless. Which bad person in this world would dare to capture you? "Senior brother, let's go." Amon's chubby figure leaped up onto Xianxia's shoulder, and his paws embraced Xianxia's neck like a flurry toy that hung there before he said with a comfortable expression, "I haven't eaten in so many years. Senior brother, bring me to go have food." The corners of Xianxia's mouth couldn't help but twitch fiercely because he recalled Ling Bai, Bai Kuei, and Axiu, and it seemed like there was never a lack of gluttons by his side. "We really should leave." Xianxia took a deep breath as he glanced at the thatched house Taoist temple before turning around and heading up the stairway to the Dao platform. And he didn't continue staying here any longer. Crack! When Xianxia and Amon left, the heaven-imprisoning Dao shackles that Amon had left on the ground was suddenly suffused with a wisp of golden brilliance, and it flew up as if it possessed intelligence of its own and tightly locked up the door of the thatched house. "Damn it!" Suddenly, an extremely low and hoarse roar sounded out from within the thatched house. "Huang Amon, do you think you can trap me with the heaven-imprisoning Dao shackles? Just you wait, you damnable idiot. I'll surely break out of here when the upheaval of the 3 dimensions arrives, and I'll annihilate everyone from your Sky Dao Palace." The voice revealed boundless rage, resentment, and unwillingness before returning to silence in the end. Rumble. On the ancient yet ordinary Dao platform, the door that led underground vanished silently, and it was impossible to notice a trace of it any longer. The river of yin and yang, the 4 sacrificial altars, and the 8 palaces in the surroundings of the Dao platforms erupted with strands of clear and misty divine brilliance at practically the same moment, and it shot into the sky. At the same time, the lofty peak that was shaped like the head of a dragon and the vast river that was shaped like the character. In the outside world both surged with a beam of light that shot into the sky and was suffused with divine radiance, causing an area of 50,000 kilometers in the surroundings to be illuminated. It was like a vast divine miracle had descended, and it instantly drew the attention of all the cultivators nearby, causing all of them to converge their gazes over there. However, the blazing glow was too dazzling, and it completely drowned out the entire surroundings, causing even the immortal perception of an earthly immortal realm expert to find it impossible to see through the events happening within the radiance. After a short moment, the radiance dispersed, and everything returned to normal. However, to everyone's horror, the character-shaped river and dragon-head-shaped mountain had actually vanished into thin air, and only a barren and rocky ground remained there. What exactly occurred here? In these past few days, and along with the news of the treasure map in Xianxia's hands being spread, it had drawn numerous experts from all over to come here. All of them firmly believed that if the Sky Dao Palace's treasure vault existed, then it would surely be near the river shaped in the form of the character. Yet now, before they could unearth any inside information, the river and mountain had actually vanished into thin air. So how could they not be shocked? Could it be that the Sky Dao Palace's treasure vault has been obtained by someone? Everyone couldn't figure it out no matter how they racked their brains. Only a small group of people faintly guessed that all of this might be closely related to Xianxia. After all, Xianxia had just annihilated all the earthly immortal realm experts of the Heavenflow Dao sect a few days ago, and then it drew out the immortal emissary Bing Shirtian at the end. On the other hand, since Xianxia entered the character-shaped river that day, he'd vanished completely. All of these tiny clues seemed to faintly show that all the phenomenon that had occurred before them seemed to be related to Xianxia. Of course, all of this was only a guess, and no one dared to confirm that all of this was really related to Xianxia. Outside the Sky Dao abandoned mountain, Xianxia withdrew his gaze and asked, "Aman, was that phenomenon related to you?" The little gold bear was snoring on Xianxia's shoulder, and he spoke drowsily when he heard this. "Oh, it wasn't me. It's related to the heaven-imprisoning Dao shackles. All of this is—" As he spoke, his head tilted and he fell asleep. Xianxia was helpless as he knew it was simply more difficult than ascending the heavens to find out anything from this simple-minded little fellow. "Never mind, I'll go to Corona City first and see how that junior Marquis of Marquis Wen's estate is now." Xianxia shook his head and pondered briefly before he decided. And then his figure flashed as he headed towards Corona City.